Is this coming through here? I don't.
I didn't know you were a religious man, Henson. I'm not.
Asco Chum while she buzzing by. Skybound souls do well, while the others give love a try. Give love a try. While the others are still here, latching on to many souls, trying to live through the sin. Vigils on my mama's soul, trying bend. Had to humble me, call upon her all sin. Dancing with my fears, I was spawned with reason. Grandmama can't breathe, she wheezing. Feelings change with the season, trying ease in. So it gracefully, can't let the spirit take me like the water do. I was only 2 waves breaking. We adjacent, fears chasing me away. When Gabrielle gone, will navy blue stay? We was looking like prey. Ain't no use in the garb on my beard like Che. Message from the heavens, navy blue is a sage. Lead a long life, read the M in my hand, yeah, yeah. M in my hand, yeah, yeah. Lead a long life, read the M in my hand, yeah, yeah. M in my hand, yeah, yeah. Read the M in my hand, yeah. Lead a long life, M in my hand, yeah, yeah. M in my hand,
Yeah. You and I. This is beautiful music, right?
My family been some casualties. My auntie told me dream and see forever. I got sent to the east. Don't know which way they went. My folks say from the south. My name called deep in the pavement. Nigga Hans is still in the house. Little sister, the last one knowing. Grown on the path I've chosen. Don't you worry, I'm golden. Yeah, sun gon' set in the west. Blessed by the grace I'm holding. Skin color, clay so golden. I was there when the light did approach. Time's been away, I've noticed. When I'm in the shade, I'm focused. Most of the time, my pops is a culprit. Repairing the bond is broken. Looking back, I can see it all. See my mama's face.
Love is written in the stars. Oh God, God.
I know my grandma God is my mama God. It's all the same. It's all the same. In His name, in Jesus' name we pray. lighthouse shine in summer, spring. My sister take the fall with me forever. Yeah. My family been some casualties. My auntie told me dream and see forever. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, with all my fears in front of me, I know this sadness won't last forever. Yeah, yeah. I said, thank you, Ma, for loving me. She told me that it is a pleasure. It is a pleasure. Yeah. Now I know, Ma replied, you don't. Time to face your problems, boy. Get master paint with smoke. Now I know, Ma replied, you don't. Time to face your problems, boy. Get master paint with smoke. Now I know, no you don't. My replied you don't. What I'm learning is called growth.
It's called gross. All right, beautiful. Sweet stream. How we doing today? It's April 16th. Beautiful day out. My girlfriend has a day off, so we'll see how long I stream for. I don't know if I have like a deep curiosity of playing with Clay today. I don't want to play some. I kind of want to do some other stuff. It's the prudent thing to do to play with Clay, so I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna try to work on our thing a little bit, see if we can make something better, or just see what we can do. I don't have a super deep plan about it. But yeah, I kind of just got some other things on, so we're gonna do that. But I guess it's a good time to just get our rants off and yeah, cruise the web a little bit, see what we can learn. Found out about this term yesterday that I really like, called the purpose. Oh, I should do some cleaning today. Yeah, the purpose of a system is what it does. Basically, what it means is, yeah, the outcomes that a system produces is the purpose of it, not the stated intentions or the mission statements or any of that stuff. It's more like, what are the observable outcomes that are produced by the system, and that's what the system is designed to do then. Which makes me think about a few different things. Nothing really solid or definitive. But it makes me think like makes me think, what is the purpose of government? Maybe I need to read a little bit more about that and learn some more about what the government actually does, because in an oversimplistic way, I definitely feel like what the government does is make things more expensive. They print a lot of money and make things more expensive. But that's clearly a cynical way of viewing it. I mean, they maintain roads, that's nice. We have free healthcare in Canada. But really what we have, I think, is free sick care. Like preventative measures are free. Or sorry, interactive measures or intervention measures are free. But yeah, everybody knows that healthcare in the preventative sense, i.e. like going to your dentist on a regular basis, that's not free. Going to a physiotherapist, that's not free. Any sort of specialist, none of that stuff is free. That's interesting, isn't it? Education is free. I think it's free in most places. Obviously, you can find private education that isn't free, but how does Canada rank in terms of how does Canada rank in education globally? And how would you measure this? I guess like happiness, productivity. What else? What else would be a part of that? Right? I'm thinking like, who's it? Naval has a saying like, if you're so smart, why aren't you happy? Which I love because it's kind of like, well, what else do you want to use your brain to do, other than to make itself feel good? And how, where you get your kicks, makes your brain feel good varies from person to person. Some people are really dedicated to their career. Some people are really dedicated to, their craft, or some people are dedicated to their family. Whatever it may be, everybody has their different hero's journey in the way that they want to accomplish themselves in the universe. And some people don't have that, and maybe those are the ones that aren't happy. But um, yeah, just generally like, well, education is what exactly? It's to understand, to have knowledge. But knowledge, I think, is like sweet nothing if it doesn't produce something that you want, right? And so, what do we want? I guess happiness. Uh, how else can you measure education? Like productivity, mobility. I'm not sure. Let's actually do this. Let's get ChatGPT to let's put this thing on a little journey here. Fastest and advanced reason. Let's do O3. Okay. Let's try this whisper thing again. I'm curious how Canada ranks globally in education. Um, rank, I think, is super important in understanding this, and so what I want to look at rank, the things I want to rank is probably most importantly is happiness, because there's this, nice little pithy statement from Naval Ravikant that says, if you're so happy, or if you're so smart, rather, if you're so smart, why aren't you happy? Um, so yeah, I think happiness is a good one. I think like productivity, are people wealthy in terms of money on a, GDP divided by, or I guess GDP, but also inequality within, what else? I would say trust, uh, growth. I think those are the kind of ones that I think about. But yeah, I wanna know how Canada is doing in terms of educating its people. Anyways, we're gonna let that thing go do that. Postwid. Yeah, let's get into it. Yeah, Bitcoin's price today, April 16th, April 18th, 84,510 US dollars, 1.687 trillion, or a block height 893,002 with 121.51 terahash, which is all-time high. If anybody's watching this and is a Bitcoiner, this is the most important metric that you want to look at with Bitcoin. And if you aren't a Bitcoin, forget price, forget all of that bullshit. The hash rate is the most important, because the purpose of Bitcoin, POSWID, the purpose of the system is what it does. The purpose of Bitcoin is to establish a neutral how do you say, a neutral place to store your energy. That's what Bitcoin is. And to store it, it must be secure. That is the purpose of Bitcoin, is to be secure. It needs to be reliable. And, most people, when I talk to them about Bitcoin, and it's not like I talk to a ton of people about Bitcoin, but without fail, like literally, I've never met a person in my personal life. I'm sure I've seen some online, but I've never met a person in 3D space that ever says anything about Bitcoin other than the price of it. In particular, relative to its all-time high. So it's like, oh, it's crashing right now. Oh, it's doing so bad. I'm like, dude, the price literally is just a number. There's just asymmetries all the time. Why Bitcoin is worse, and this is another really important one. And I'm just saying this because I'm like, I'm interested in this, and I think this is useful information. But if you're curious about Bitcoin and you haven't bought it, I think one question you need to ask yourself is like, how did this little protocol that was just passed around on email chains, how did it accumulate $1.687 trillion US dollars worth of value? How did that happen? Why did that happen? There's no company behind it. There's no CEO of Bitcoin. There's no marketing division, communications division, or HR or anything like that. It's literally just an internet protocol that hundreds of thousands of people have independently decided, like, I'm going to put this on my computer and run this and validate these nodes and validate this blockchain. How did that happen? Why? Right? People talk about it has no use. Okay, well, that's clearly not true. So just think a little bit harder. What is the use of it? It's to store very securely your energy. And it's just interesting that $1 trillion has accumulated in this thing, right? It's very interesting. Why I think it does, why it has, is because it's secure. That's why I think hash rate is the most important thing. That's what we're going to track here on the show, at least moving forward. 5,000 plus days that it's been up and active. There's been no breakdowns in it. There's been no hacks. Anytime there's a story about somebody having their Bitcoin stolen, it was not stolen. It was misplaced. Let somebody else get to their keys, or some like centralized organization was likely hacked. But that wasn't the Bitcoin blockchain that was hacked. That was the intermediary. Anyways, that's not really what I want to talk about, but that's where we're at. Channel views, we're at 445, which, let's actually look at the daily vitamins thing and see when we started tracking that, because I'm not 100% sure, but we are starting to do some numbers. No, I know, I'm not too dumb. Kind of face your problems, boy, can't manage the pain with me. This is the first time we started tracking it. Okay, so 386. That was on the 17th, or that was episode 17 on the 14th. So yeah, in 4 days, we almost got 100 new views. That's cool, man. I'm excited about that. It means we're doing things right, so that's good. I guess it doesn't really mean we're doing things right, but people are tuning in, and I appreciate that. I think if we look at the stats, they're not tuning in for very long, but that's another story. We'll work on that later. And maybe that's not even the important thing. We're just here every day trying to learn, trying to get better. And maybe I gotta stop talking about we. I am. This is just me trying to get better and such a chair. And I'm interested in computers and stuff like that. So I feel like I can make like an interesting thing out of it. So yeah, I'm not gonna do this at all, but yeah, TinyGrad, really cool project by George Hotz. I love the indie hacker in him, although he would probably cringe if I said he was an indie hacker. He's not, but I love the sort of sense of personal responsibility that you hear from this guy. And yeah, check out his stuff if you have time. I definitely take a lot of inspiration from George Hotz here. If you go look at his stuff, it's yeah. Anyways, we'll leave it there. I don't want to get too into this, but check them out. I'm gonna make sure I have all these notifications set on for him because get rid of that. I'm based in Canada. There was an election. I don't know if I want to watch the debates, but oh, this thing. Education. Are you interested in ranking Canada by education quality, outcomes like test scores, literacy, or success attainment? Transcripts should I compare Canada to countries global greatest developed nations? I told you what was interested in with respect to measuring education, literacy, and access / attainment don't interest me so much. Compare Canada, I guess among developed. I don't like that. I want to know more recently than the last 10 years. All right. Yeah, let's actually watch some of
From
this.
the atrium of Maison Radio Canada in Montreal, 4 federal leaders will debate for your vote. The leaders are here and ready to go. Mark Carney, Pierre Poilievre, Yves-François Blanchet, and Jagmeet Singh. They will debate the major challenges facing our country. Everybody, stay on theme, stay on time. This is the Well, welcome, leaders. Good to be with you here tonight in Montreal for what I'm sure will be a memorable evening. Our first theme is tariffs and threats to Canada, and we will begin with a round of questions. You will each have a minute to answer, and then we'll go to open debate. And the first question goes to Mr. Carney.
Do they not
Okay,
have like
what is the starting point for negotiations, Mr. Carney, with the United States if, as you have stated, our relationship with the U.S. is over as we know it?
Well, first, Steve, may I thank you and also thank fellow leaders for their service to Canada, people at home for taking the time to watch. I just want to underscore the premise of your question, because I think the relationship that we've had with the United States, relationship over the course of almost the last 4 decades, which has been one of steady and increasing integration, has fundamentally changed because the president is looking to fundamentally restructure the trading system. So the starting point has to be one of strength. It has to show that we have control of our own economic destiny, has to have a clear plan here at home to build this economy, to diversify our trading partners with like-minded countries, and also has to have a position of strength in terms of our reaction to the U.S. unjustified tariffs. And that's why we have put in place counter tariffs that have maximum impact in the United States and minimum impact here at home.
Mr. Poilievre, would you do anything differently?
Well, first of all, thank you, Steve, and thank you to our fellow contestants here today. It's an honor to be here. What would I do different? Well, I'll start by what I would do the same. I think we do need to counter the American tariffs with our own to deter.
I'm so cold. It is so cold. All right, let's hear what these guys have to say.
Deter this economic aggression. We must make clear that we will always be sovereign and independent. What would I be doing differently? Well, we need to be in a position of strength. The Liberal government has weakened our economy with anti-energy laws, red tape, and high taxes that have driven $500 billion out of our country into the United States and made us incapable of shipping our resources overseas. That weakness threatens our ability to stand up for ourselves. So what would I do? I would cut taxes, red tape, and improve our resource projects so that we can get our goods to market and bring home the jobs so we stand up to President Trump from a position of strength.
Mr. Singh, you get the next question. Can we trust the United States to work with us on matters such as Arctic sovereignty and defense policy?
I think we've seen, first of all, good evening, everyone, and thank you for tuning in, and thanks for the question, Steve. We've seen what, for a lot of people, feels like a betrayal when we look at the United States. I grew up in a border town, I grew up in Windsor, and we saw how connected we were as a city and as a community. People lived on one side of the border, worked on the other, people traveled back and forth all the time. We're in the automotive capital of Canada, and we knew how important it was to be able to build cars in Canada, but we saw that those cars went back and forth across the border. Seeing what Donald Trump did to attack Canada in this unprovoked way without any justification really felt like a betrayal. And so Canadians now are right to say, well, we don't really trust Donald Trump at this point, and we can't really have a lot of faith in it. So when it comes to our Arctic sovereignty and our security, we need to make decisions that are in our best interest and no longer be so dependent and so reliant on the U.S. And that's what I would advocate for, making sure we are resilient, independent, and less dependent on the United States.
Mr. Blanchet, for you, what supports would you want to see for industries affected by tariffs, many, of course, of which are in Quebec?
Many of them. First, we all welcome in Quebec and Montreal. You have me because I try not to speak English in Montreal. However, I think we should never underestimate the threat that Mr. Trump poses on Quebec economy and Canada economy and Mexico economy. But we must acknowledge the fact that the economy of Quebec is built differently. The challenges are not the same. The necessity for Quebec to have at least partly its own voice in the negotiation is important. The difference between Quebec and Canada is very important in terms of economy, but also in terms of identity and language and values and who we are and the way we want to handle immigration. So we have the right to be different, and if this difference is being respected by whoever becomes Prime Minister of Canada, we will be reliable partners in order to achieve the best possible negotiation and protect ourselves and our economies as partners.
Merci, Monsieur Blanchet. Okay, we now move into open debate, and I'll start it off, Mr. Carney, with you, and then we go from there. Do you still support dollar-for-dollar tariffs, even if they ultimately threaten Canadian jobs and businesses?
No, and in fact, we've already moved off from dollar-for-dollar tariffs. We have to recognize, and I think we all do, the United States economy is more than 10 times the size of the Canadian economy. And the principle in terms of our counter tariffs is to have maximum impact in the United States, as I said a moment ago, minimum impact here. So we have to think about the impact on Canadian businesses. I'll give you one example, if I may. In the auto sector, the way we've designed those auto tariffs is that Canadian automakers, if they maintain production here, if they maintain their investments here, when I say Canadian automakers, I mean automakers that have jobs and plants and production in Canada, then they can have lower tariffs on what they ship to the United States. We create a huge incentive for them in order to do that. We also have carved out the Canadian auto parts sector. Last point, I know you're pressed for time, the Canadian auto parts sector, so that it can remain competitive with the United States. We're focused on maximizing Canadian jobs, maximizing the harm in the U.S., so that we get them where we need them.
Mr. Poilievre, you want in, then Mr. Singh.
Well, Mr. Carney, you claim that you want our country to respond with strength, but after the last decade, half of which time you've been Justin Trudeau's economic advisor, our economy is weaker than ever before. It's been the worst growth in the G7. We've lost $500 billion of investment south of the border. You supported blocking pipelines in Canada that gave Donald Trump and the U.S. a near monopoly over our energy. And now you want to keep in place Bill C-69, the liberal no new development law that blocks us from shipping our resources overseas. How could you possibly think it's a good idea to give the Americans a continued monopoly on our energy projects when you have seen how much these liberal policies have weakened our country over the last decade?
Let Mr. Carney respond, and then Mr. Singh.
Sure.
If I may, yes. So let's go to my record. My record is a month long as Prime Minister. And this goes to the heart of coming to the Americans with strength, but doing the right thing for Canada. Within the first week as Prime Minister, I sat down with all the premiers of the provinces and territories, as well as the leaders of the Indigenous peoples. Got an agreement with all the provinces and territories, doesn't happen very often, got an agreement for them to have one Canadian economy instead of 13, first point. Secondly, to commit the federal government to do its part by Canada Day, so free trade in Canada by Canada Day. Thirdly, the federal government to commit with respect to project review.
question was about
Sorry,
pipelines.
I'm getting to it. Thirdly, one project, one review, and relying
That's not
on
possible
provincial,
under
yes, it is
C-69.
possible under, it is possible under system.
No,
It is the impact
It's banned
assessment.
under
It is agreed on under the impact assessment framework, and we have a cooperation agreement with British Columbia already. We're looking forward to them with the other provinces. We will move forward.
I've got to let
jump
Mr.
in on this.
Singh turn, please.
Of course we agree around
around having a strategic response to the United States. But what I'm concerned about is what we're doing here in Canada. We are already seeing threats to our country in that just the threats alone of the tariffs have meant Canadians have lost their jobs. The threats of the tariffs that are in place right now, the impact of those tariffs is that we've lost jobs in steel, aluminum, and the auto sector. People are already losing their jobs. And while Mr. Carney, you had time, as you mentioned, not very long time, but as Prime Minister, you showed us your priorities. The first thing you did is you had traveled, you made a tax cut for millionaires, which was reversing on the capital gains. So you gave a tax cut to millionaires, but you didn't have time to increase the amount that workers get on EI. Right now, workers who are struggling and wondering, what am I going to do if I lose my job? Workers who've lost their job are saying, how do I pay my bills when EI only covers half of a worker's salary? Maybe 40 years ago that would have worked, but right now most workers are spending their entire salary just to pay the bills, to pay their mortgage and their rents, and to put food on the table. So EI is not good enough, and it shows Canadians that you didn't make it a priority to protect those that are impacted by these tariffs, that are threatened because their jobs are lost.
We have not heard from Monsieur Blanchet yet in this segment, so please.
Yeah, Mr. Carney, you are becoming a real Canadian leader, saying one thing in French and another one in English. You said in British Columbia in February that you would force oil and gas through pipelines through Quebec, either we wanted it or not. You would use emergency powers in order to do so. And 2 days later in Montreal, you said that you would never do that without the approval of Quebec. What's the point of using emergency powers if you do have the agreement of Quebec? However, I do agree with you. It's important to be very strong in front of Mr. Trump. However, I would keep the dollar for dollar policy. Don't be weak in front of Mr. Trump. And those counter tariffs have to be targeted. You have put out already $2 billion for Ontario auto industry, car industry, and the lumberwood industry in Quebec has already paid to the United States $2 billion, and you have not raised one finger in order to help us.
Let's get from Mr. Poilievre and then a response from Mr. Carney.
Well, Mr. Carney refused to answer the question about pipelines. Just the other day, he said that he doesn't necessarily think we need to build pipelines. Let me tell you what that means. Right now, the Americans get 97% of our oil, 100% of our natural gas exports at big discounts. We have to send Canadian oil from Western Canada through the States just to get it back to Quebec because we don't have a pipeline. And now there's this law, Liberal Law C-69, which effectively bans pipelines. The 14 biggest energy and resource companies say it has to go if we're ever going to build another project. And I asked Mr. Carney why he would keep in place this anti-pipeline law that effectively empowers Donald Trump to have a total monopoly on our single biggest export. Why would you not repeal this Liberal law? Isn't it because you are exactly the same in the same line as Justin Trudeau and the rest of the Liberal team that is now making up your cabinet?
Let's get a response.
Well, let me pick up a couple of points that have been made. The first thing I did as Prime Minister was to cut the carbon tax. That's the first thing. Second thing is made a commitment that all proceeds from our tariffs will go to workers and those companies most affected. There were several points raised.
Nothing so far.
Mr. Steve, if I may address, I'm trying to do it quickly because several points. Most affected. Made a commitment that all proceeds from our tariffs will go to workers and those companies most affected. There were several points raised.
Nothing so far.
Mr. Steve, if I may address, I'm trying to do it quickly because several points raised. All proceeds go to workers and the firms most effective, and those proceeds are considerable. Third thing, I'm interested in solutions. I'm interested in getting energy infrastructure built. That means pipelines. That means carbon capture storage. That means electricity grids. And here's how you do it. And we've already moved in the first month. Cooperation agreements with the provinces. Guess what? We are a federation. You need to cooperate with Quebec. You need to cooperate with the provinces. You need to get First Nations and Indigenous people buy-in. You can do that through the one project, one review window that we put in place at that first ministers' meeting, as well as, if necessary, using emergency powers to fulfill the.
I don't really watch a lot of these. I don't know if I've ever watched debates like this. Two things come to mind, and then I'm going to jump back into it. But one, it seems like being the sitting president, or prime minister rather, really is a disadvantage. Maybe. I don't know. It seems like he... Is it an advantage or disadvantage? I think the advantage is that you have like this guy came in, he's like, look, in my first month of prime minister, this is what I did. And that means something. Although you've only done it for a month, so who's to say you're not just going to change that? But why I think it's a disadvantage is that it seems like people are gonna be like, dude, you're doing this right now, like you're lying. And I think everybody's energy is going to be directed towards you around things that you've done wrong, and definitely not about celebrating what you've done right. Yeah. Dude, is my hairline going? Oh my gosh. Holy. Some widow's peak, is that what those are called? Oh my gosh. Oh no. Anyways. Wow, that was just that right there. Look at this whole setup right now. It's just me on my computer. watching these tariffs, be like, oh my god, my hairline. The end of an empire.
Federal responsibility, but not the unique.
Mr. Poilievre, you want to come back on that?
What you're saying, Mr.
Oh,
Carney,
what was the other thought that I had? Oh yeah, this is what I mean though. Like, it sucks that this is the state-sponsored media and that this is like the best form that they could come up with. This just seems so ineffective. You know, like you get 1 minute talk periods. There has to be like an equal share of mic time, it seems. It just does not seem effective. I don't know. This seems like
respect
theater.
is a total contradiction. The No New Development Law, C-69, guarantees there will not be one-stop shop because it requires the government of Canada to actually duplicate the
what
same,
Mr. Poilievre is saying is that have no rules,
project.
have no regulation,
have
have no
one-stop shop.
controls
Mr. Singh,
over any energy
Mr. Singh,
Sorry,
we
Mr.
just got to let him
Singh,
finish his
polluters
sentence.
pollute.
Let's just let him finish his sentence.
That is not true. In fact, Mr. Singh, the reality is we should have strong rules enforced once. We shouldn't have multiple
the first
levels
time I
of
heard you talk about the
referral
environment.
that it takes now 17 years to
that your
get a
position?
major project approved in this country.
the first
Levels
time I
of
heard you talk about the
referral
environment.
that Mr. Singh, the reality is we should have strong rules enforced once. We shouldn't have multiple. The reality is we should have strong rules enforced once. In fact, it requires the government of Canada to actually duplicate
So
the
what
same,
Mr. Poilievre is saying is that
duplicate the
have no
same
rules,
project.
have no
No,
regulation,
have
have no
one-stop shop.
controls
Mr. Singh,
over,
let's
over any energy
Mr. Singh,
development.
we just got to let him
Mr.
finish
Let
his
big polluters
sentence.
pollute.
Let's just let him finish his sentence.
That is not true. In fact, Mr. Singh, the reality is we should have strong rules enforced once. We shouldn't have multiple
the first
levels
time
of
I heard you care about
referral
the environment.
that it takes now 17 years to
that your new
get a
position?
major project approved in this country. That is why in the last 10 years we've had the worst economic growth in the entire
Liberals bought a
G7.
pipeline and
We
built a
cannot
pipeline.
afford
They're
a
pretty
fourth
pro-pipeline.
liberal term. We need a change, and the Conservative plan for a change will include repealing the anti-pipeline law so we can get our energy to markets other than the United
Mr.
States.
Singh, then Mr. Carney.
While these two compete about who's more pro-pipeline, I think what we need to do is, I mean, it's clear. The Liberals bought a pipeline. They built a pipeline. I don't know what Pierre is complaining about. That's what they did. I think what we need to do, if we're talking about energy in our country, we need to build an east-west grid. Let's use our power as a nation to build a national project that creates good jobs, that strengthens us for the future, where we connect the low-cost energy from jurisdictions and provinces across this beautiful land and have low-cost energy for businesses, for people, so we can build a stronger economy. That's the energy of the future that we need.
Mr. Carney.
3 quick points. First, the pipeline built, yes, TMX built. That's why oil exports up 50% over the course of the last few years. Secondly,
I don't think that's a bragging point,
Mr. Singh is absolutely right about the east-west grid. Secondly,
I don't think that's a bragging point,
First, the pipeline built, yes, TMX built. That's why oil exports up 50% over the course of the last few years. Secondly,
I don't think that's a bragging point,
I don't know why that bothers me that Mr. Singh says. I don't think that's a bragging point. To me, it kind of seems like this mentality of like just throw your head in the sand. I don't think it's a bragging point. It's like, dude, this is what we have here. This is what the world needs from us. This energy. I think the issue is that it seems like a lot of the problems in the world is that we don't have good explanations for them. You know, a good explanation in that, like, this explanation is good enough. You know? And I think fundamentally engineers are just better suited to do these things. To diagnose issues and think about systems. That I think politics is like a study more of history and trying to intuit I guess, morality of things. But morality to me just seems like such a, and maybe it shouldn't be. I don't really know. I'm really thinking out loud here. I'm not sure. I'm just trying to think about all of this as we go. But to me, fundamentally, it's kind of like the world can't run on renewables today. Maybe we could do nuclear, but that was kind of, not super popular, which is a shame. But we can't really do nuclear, and we don't have good enough batteries to store energy properly. There's a really good book called The Grid. It kind of talks about this, where it's like our electrical grid was built like 60s, 70s, and it's kind of shitty. It's not super efficient. And so basically how energy works, when it's actually produced at a plant, like it needs to be used instantaneously. It can't just sit and wait. And so renewables obviously dependent upon like meteorological systems that we have no explanation for, obviously. And they're more of a force of nature, not really something we can predict super well. And so renewables during their peak hours, great. They produce things relatively low cost. They don't produce a lot of carbon, but who knows when they're going to be active, right? Like a windmill. If it's not windy, what are you going to do? um, if it's not sunny, like Vancouver, for instance, during the winter, what are you going to do? The world runs on oil and gas. And I think it's definitely a win to say, like, hey, we have more deposits than 90% of the world. I don't even know if that number is correct. That's just a intuition, at least what I've been told. And so we should probably try to use that and produce that instead of not. Like I look at China. You ever watch videos of like China in 4K of these cities, and you're like, dude, these places like seem inspiring. And I've never visited China. I don't know anything about China, so I probably shouldn't speak on it. But I think that's coming from like a humble place, and I think people that don't know anything about China are more than happy to speak about it, right? Like the morality of the system that they live in. I don't really know. I don't know what that system looks like and how the people are there, but um, I look at their cities and I'm like, man, I wish that Canadian cities look like that. I'll tell you that. And I think it's because their governments, again, I don't know this, but this is what I've heard is that, most of them have degrees in science, technology, and math rather than acting and politicians or politics or sociology and stuff like this. Yeah, anyways.
Mr. Singh is absolutely right about the East-West grid. Grid interconnections, which is part of the energy corridor, huge opportunities for this country. We have to be able to do more than one thing. Third point, fundamental point. We can give ourselves far more than Donald Trump can ever take away. If we have one Canadian economy, not 13, and if we just look at that agreement we got with the provinces, look at what Ontario and Nova Scotia have just announced in terms of their steps towards this, this is within our grasp.
Monsieur Blanchet, what should we be prepared to concede in our negotiations with the United States?
I want to be back to something that Mr. Carney said. You can't do something and the opposite, and you can't fill people's minds.
I'm getting this vibe that Bloc Québécois, maybe they're homies with Pierre, and they're really trying to go at Carney, and NDP are homies with Carney, and they're trying to go at Pierre. Or Jagmeet, what is this guy's name? I don't remember.
With nonsense.
I gotta
Quebec
some pants.
has
I'm cold. I need to throw a sweater on. I'm so cold. What is this? So like this for a bit.
By law, its own environmental review institution, and you cannot, through a federal decision, even through a Quebec government decision, go over the BAP, as we call it. If the BAP says no,
Just say.
it's no.
I know. I know.
Good.
I know.
Let's
but this
keep
is
that in mind.
This is the point. This is, if I may, this is the point. The federal government can do the following, which is to take the decision to abide by the decision of the Quebec BAP. That is within the federal government's power. That is known as cooperative federalism. That's what we need to
And
do.
do you
in a-
understand
this
one
is
other
what-
point
This is
fast?
what we need. If we, I mean, this is what we need to do in a crisis.
Brèvement ici, and then Mr. Poilievre.
Yeah. The building of those pipelines will take at least 10 to 14 years. Mr. Trump will be 90 years old, not president no more,
might-
and somebody, of course, less terrible will
try.
be there before you can even dream of
looks like my YouTube
having
increased
oil through this
timestamps.
pipeline of yours.
We're less than a minute to go. Mr. Poilievre, I promised you next.
Listen, after the last 10 years of liberals
long
blocking
relations.
pipelines, and killing jobs.
Sounds wild when you
we
say that.
actually
Sounds
we
like
actually need to get things
100%.
done.
Lives is 2 to 6 hours, often switching topics, stepping away from computer. I want the timestamps to be very discrete, i.e. many tiny ones. How could I do this?
We need a change, and our conservative plan for change will repeal the No New Pipelines law. It will create a true one-stop shop, set up shovel-ready zones with pre-permitting so that we can approve LNG liquefaction export plants, mines, pipelines, nuclear plants, and also
said no to that.
hydroelectric dams so that we can generate the power we need to be strong, self-reliant, and stand on our own 2
Can I-
feet for a change.
Last quick word to Mr. Carney.
Okay, quick word. Bringing it back to what we're talking about, which is tariffs, the threats to Canada, how to negotiate. We need these options. We need these options to build domestically, to build one Canadian
Vitamins,
economy.
yes.
We need to act. We need to diversify our trade partners.
And that is
will
our
give us
time in this
strength to the
segment.
US.
That is our time. Okay, you know my job tonight. I got to be the heavy guy here every now and then, making sure everybody comes to time.
We've
And
got
I'm
trade
keeping an eye
deficits
as
today.
well on making sure that everybody gets rough justice over here. That concludes our first section and our first debate.
I want to be back to something that Mr. Carney said. You can't do something and the opposite, and you can't fill people's mind with nonsense. Quebec has, by law, its own environmental review institution, and you cannot, through a federal decision, even through a Quebec government decision, go over the BAP, as we call it. If the BAP says no,
Just say.
it's no.
I know.
Good.
I know,
Let's
but this
keep
is
that in mind.
This is the point. This is, if I may, this is the point. The federal government can do the following, which is to take the decision to abide by the decision of the Quebec BAP. That is within the federal government's power. That is known as cooperative federalism. That's what we need to
And
do.
do you
in a-
understand
this
one
is
other
what-
point
This is
fast?
what we need. This is what we need to do in a crisis.
We have Moïse and then Mr. Poilievre.
Yeah. The building of those pipelines will take at least 10 to 14 years. Mr. Trump will be 90 years old, not president no more,
might-
and somebody,
try.
of course, less terrible will be there before you can even dream of having oil through this pipeline of yours.
We're less than a minute to go. Mr. Poilievre, I promised you next.
East.
Listen, after the last 10 years
West
of liberals
Grid.
blocking pipelines and killing jobs,
Sounds wild when you
we
say that.
actually
Sounds like
actually need to get things
100%.
done. We need to change killing jobs.
Sounds wild when you
10 years of liberals blocking pipelines and killing jobs.
Sounds wild when you
we
say that.
actually
Sounds
we
like
actually need to get things done.
100%.
We need a change. And our conservative plan for change will repeal the No New Pipelines law. It will create we
say that.
actually of liberals blocking pipelines and killing jobs.
Sounds wild when you
we
say that.
actually
Sounds
we ac-
And, you know, I think I really don't like. I haven't listened to him a ton. I haven't listened to any of these guys a ton, to be honest with you. Like I said, relatively unengaged, but I don't really like Jagmeet's like attitude. It seems juvenile. It's like every time Pierre is talking, he's jumping in. It's something weird that he's saying that, like climate change. It's just kind of condescending, and I don't know. I don't know. I mean, maybe all these guys are condescending assholes too, right? They probably are on some level. Uh, Carney actually seems like the most uh, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't even know. Chillest, I guess.
Actually need to get things
that makes
done.
sense.
We need a change, and our conservative plan for change will repeal the no
Anyways.
new pipeline.
I do want to take a moment to collect some thoughts. So the East-West grid that Jagmeet and Mark Carney talked about interests me. What is it? What are they referring to? Because yeah, I think definitely anybody that's talking about updating the electrical grid, I think that's a huge step in sort of producing just a better, more energy efficient community and country. I think it's a good thing. Uh, I think it would create jobs. That's great. I'm definitely down with a pipeline. I think it's. I should also say I'm from Alberta, Canada, a very famous place with respect to producing of oil, and so that obviously informs a lot of how I view this, because this is the thing that fed my family and I, and created opportunities for me. I do wonder, like, if we were talking about, like, no, cars are so bad they use all this oil and fuel, like, let's not produce them. Jagmeet being from Windsor, I wonder how he would feel. Anyways, because like Canada's not a car manufacturer. That's not what we're known for. But we are definitely known for producing oil and gas. I will say cleaner than basically any other place on the planet, and there's a lot of regulations around doing it safely. I actually worked in the oil and gas industry, albeit as a medic, but yeah, I was on a service rig for a brief time where, I was a medical responder for this particular crew of guys that were going out to wells up in Rainbow Lake and replacing the pipe, and it's not glorious work. I think it's really tough hard work. Anyways,
Law. It will create a true one-stop shop, set up, ready.
what are the other questions I had? Yeah. How is Quebec a separate economy from Canada? Bloc Quebecois leader mentioned a few things.
Shovel-ready zones with pre-permitting so that we can approve LNG liquefaction export plants, mines, pipelines, nuclear plants, and also
said no.
hydroelectric dams so that we can generate the power we need to be strong, self-reliant, and stand on our own 2 feet for change.
Last quick word, Mr. Carney.
Okay, quick word. Bringing it back to what we were talking about, which is tariffs, the threats to Canada, how to negotiate. We need these options. We need these options to build domestically, to build one Canadian economy. We need to act. We need to diversify our trade partners.
And that is
will
our
give us
time in this
strength to the
segment.
US.
That is our time. Okay, you know my job tonight. I got to be the heavy guy
Quebecois, not really want to talk. Jagmeet doesn't really want to talk.
here every now and then, making sure everybody comes to time. And I'm keeping an eye as well on making sure that everybody gets rough justice over here. That concludes our first section and our first debate. Up next, affordability and the cost of living.
So debate 1 was tariffs. Debate number 1. Debate number 2. Tariffs. Affordability.
Parler des entreprises du Québec,
Energy.
By open debate format, and Mr. Polyev, you get the first question this time. Many provinces, including some provinces with conservative governments, have ambitious housing targets, none of which have been met. Why do you think your housing plan will be any different?
Let me start by talking to the young people of the nation and those who are aspiring to home ownership. It was only 10 years ago you could buy an average house for $450,000. But in the last lost liberal decade, housing costs have doubled, rising faster than in any country in the G7. And so now our youth cannot afford a home, and our seniors are worried about being evicted. We can't afford a fourth liberal term of rising housing costs. We need a change. And our conservative plan for change will, 1, axe the federal sales tax on new homes. 2, incentivize municipalities to cut their construction taxes to bring houses down in cost by $100,000. 3, sell off federal land for homes. And 4, train up 350,000 young trades workers who can help build those homes. Because you deserve a home, and we're going to make it happen for a change.
Also on the issue of affordability, Mr. Singh, you get the next question. How do you bring down grocery prices in the midst of a trade war?
I appreciate the question. This is a big concern. When I talk to Canadians, they tell me they're really feeling squeezed from the cost of living. That's one of the top things that people tell me about. People are saying, I can't afford to buy groceries.
We
Every
know
time I go to
what
the
people
grocery
are
store,
telling you. Let's hear
it's
it.
just ongoing worry and this feeling of anxiety that can I actually afford the things that my family needs? On top of that, people are worried about the cost of homes. I think those are the two biggest things I hear. So we can do things about this. Other countries have taken concrete steps. We can put in a price cap on food essentials. France has done it.
That's
Greece has done it
inflationary.
to great success. It's brought down the cost of food significantly in both those jurisdictions. We can also ban corporate landlords from buying up the affordable homes to keep homes that are affordable. We can make things better for Canadians, but it requires having the courage to take on the powerful corporations that are ripping you off, that are price gouging things better for Canadians. But ban corporate landlords from buying up the affordable homes to
Ban corporate landlords from buying up homes. I don't think I disagree with that on the face of it, but again, I come from Alberta. My parents, my dad started a safety company doing this. I know part of why he was able to operate, because we're in remote areas, is that he was able to buy, I don't know if they rented or bought it, but they were able to have a home where their employees, who are, coming from all over Canada, primarily BC and other parts of Alberta, but coming from all over Canada, so that they could actually like stay in the house while they worked. So I wonder what are the like, what are the details of this? Yeah, this is again the thing that I'm referring to with I talked about earlier. The purpose of a system is what it does, right? This is, I think, a really key thing to remember. It's like when we talk about things like put a price cap on groceries. Price caps are inflationary. In the UK, the government exploring the possibility of asking supermarkets to introduce a voluntary price cap on foods, staples to combat the cost of living. We're describing a topic is a logic that leads to the economic collapse spiral frequently seen in the third world. Okay, so what are actually causing the shortages is that there's not enough food to go around. When there's less food, there is less demand for food. Oh, then there is demand for food. People will spend more money to obtain the food that does exist. This causes inflation. Instituting a price cap leads to a temporary decrease in inflation because the food can get more expensive, but it does nothing to address the underlying cause of the inflation, which is the shortages. This is, 100%. This is what seems to be missing. Where it's like, the cause or the purpose of a price cap is what it actually does, versus the stated purpose. It's like, oh, inflation's the affordability. It's so high. Like, this is a short-term measure. To put price caps on it, that fundamentally means that like businesses are not incentivized to do this more. That's the issue with this, right? Let's keep going through this, because I mean it's just useful to review these kind of things. So instituting price cap leads to temporary decrease in inflation because the food can't get more expensive. But this does nothing to address the underlying cause of the inflation, which is the shortage. Shortly after price caps are introduced, people begin diverting the capped goods before they reach traditional retail outlets. They then begin reselling the capped goods through non-traditional outlets where the prices aren't capped, i.e. Facebook, Craigslist, etc. If you remember the video card shortage that hit in 2020, this is exactly what happened there. But even though the black market price of the items goes up, the companies producing the item don't see any of that money. They only get paid at the price capped rate, which means there's no additional money being invested into new production. Growth is literally the only way through all of these things. People who benefit from the black markets are scalpers. Without price caps, shortages resolve in long term because the companies producing the in-demand good make more money than usual, which they then invest into additional production capacity, eventually resolving the shortage. And this, I think, is a big thing that's like lost on a lot of people that would read this and be like, oh, that's bullshit. They'll just take more money. It's like, that isn't in the best interest. That does not serve the incentives of any business. It doesn't. Businesses want to grow, right? Because it helps their longer term goals. Most businesses have what's the word I'm looking for? A time preference. Businesses have longer time preferences than humans. Businesses are more patient. They run more frugally. And, you know, speaking as the son and brother of business owners, and somebody that studied business and thinks like an owner, has started his own business 2 or 3 times. It's like, you don't take all the money for yourself. You put it back in the business if you want the business to grow and you want more money in the long term. You know, making consistently $100,000 for a salary, maybe with a 10% increase every year, is better in the long term than saying, I'm making 100,000. Well, my business made $1 million this year. I'm going to take 700,000 of that. Well, next year we didn't make anything. Oh gosh, I didn't make any money. Oh, well, we didn't make anything again. Well, dude, I have to close down this business. And that's obviously a fictitious example, but it's like, hey, do you want 800,000 in 3 years, or do you want $1 million over 10 years? That depends, right? The time value of money says that you probably want it earlier because then you can do more with it now versus having it erode through inflation. That's a thing for sure. But I don't think this is how markets operate. Anyways, let's go back to this debate.
Keep homes that are affordable. We can make things better for Canadians, but it requires having the courage to take on the powerful corporations that are ripping you off, that are price gouging you. And we know that price gouging is one of the major reasons why food prices are going up. You're never going to hear Pierre Poilievre or Mr. Carney talk about the fact that these are the corporations
Thank you,
ripping
Mr.
you
Singh.
off.
That's time. Mr. Blanchet, I want to ask you about old age security, which will soon cost this country $100 billion annually. We understand you would like to expand it. How would you pay for that?
We would want it to be just for everybody because the Liberals have created a discrimination against elders which are 65 to 75 years old, having 10% less income from federal government than those who are over 75. But the best way to do it is to have everybody pay its fair share in terms of tax, which means that one should not be entitled to hide money in fiscal paradise in order not to pay him or his clients or friends, not to pay billions of dollars in taxes that could be used to help the situation of elders. Those are things which are supposed to be applied to everybody. There are a lot of questions to be answered about that. Other ways to do it is to reduce the pressure on housing price to make sure that the whole...
How do you pay for OAS increase? What is this? OAS, Canada. Old age security. Monthly payments you can get if you're 65 or older.
budget of elders and families and workers can afford houses which have increased dramatically in
Merci,
price.
Monsieur Blanchet. That's time for this one. Mr. Carney, I want to ask you about housing, which over the past decade has gone from a problem to a crisis while the Liberals were in power. Is your policy on getting homes built any different from your predecessors, and how?
This is one of the reasons why I entered this contest because of the housing crisis, the cost of living crisis, the housing crisis, and the Trump crisis to help fix it. And I would say, look, the housing approach is fundamentally different because we need a fundamentally different approach. We need to build housing at a rate that we haven't seen since the end of the Second World War. We do need a fundamentally different approach. And with the fundamentally different approach, we can build an entirely new industry. So the question is how? Now, Mr. Poilievre and I agree on some things. Okay? I agree as well on reducing the tax on first-time home purchases as a way to buy. But I am focused on increasing the supply of homes and doing that in a way that uses Canadian technology and modular prefabricated housing, that uses Canadian lumber, including in reinforced timber, and uses Canadian workers. And in all respects, we're scaling up to double the rate of home building.
Thank you, Mr. Carney. That's time. We now move to open forum here. And Mr. Singh, you get the first comment. Many of you have pledged to cut the GST on many aspects of buying a home. And Mr. Singh, I want to ask you, would you cut the GST on anything else in order to make life more affordable?
Absolutely. In fact, I'm the only one on this stage that fought to give people a GST holiday. Interestingly, while the GST holiday helps working class folks, middle class folks by taking off the GST off essentials, the Conservatives under Pierre Poilievre voted against that. They opposed the idea of giving people, actual folks that need help, a tax break, and would rather give millionaires a tax break, which shows you whose side he's on, which is not surprising. But what is surprising is that Mr. Carney also said that giving people a break on their GST is a bad idea. Mr. Carney, why do you
Is it millionaires that he wants to give a tax break, or is it businesses? Jagmeet Singh says conservatives want to give millionaires tax breaks. Is that true? Is it businesses or the people that own the business? Anyways,
I think giving a tax break to capital gains folks that earn more than $1 million is a good idea, but helping a family afford their groceries, helping people afford their bills for their internet, their cell phone, their home heating, giving them relief to take the GST off those is a bad idea.
that's a big one actually. Cell phone prices. What do I care about? Let's make. What do I care about? Affordability. This is my phone bill is crazy. Phone bills crazy. Gas prices crazy. Homes expensive. Or GDP debt to GDP ratio is higher than anywhere else.
But giving a tax break to people who really only earn over more than $1.4 million, that's somehow a good idea.
Okay, you went after
That's your numbers.
You went after Ms. Poilievre first, so I'm going to give him the first shot to respond.
Well, Mr. Carney, the reality is that housing costs doubled under the Liberal government. While Justin Trudeau made exactly the same promises that you are now repeating today, he promised that he would double home building. In fact, home building went down. He promised that he'd reduce the cost. In fact, it went up. And now here we are. Mark Carney is asking for a fourth Liberal term, repeating the exact same Liberal promises that priced you out of a house. Just a few weeks ago, before the election, the Liberals voted against taking the GST off new homes, and they have continued to build up bureaucracies that block construction. We need a change so that you can afford a home. And our change will be, again, to axe the sales tax on new homes.
Okay, so Pierre axe sales tax on new homes. What else did he say?
Incentivize municipalities to speed up permits.
Incentivize municipalities to speed up permits on new homes.
Free up land and cut development costs. Train up 350,000 young people who can be in the trades.
Free up land. What does that mean? Free up land? What the fuck? Free up land? Train 350 trades workers. Should I get into the trades, guys?
To build those homes and sell off the land that is going to be needed in order to build homes. That is a real plan.
And sell off land. Sell off land needed to build more homes.
A real plan for you to own a home and afford your life for a change.
Mr. Carney, they're coming at you from both sides. What do you say?
Okay. I know it may be difficult, Mr. Poilievre. You spent years running against Justin Trudeau on the carbon tax, and they're both gone. Okay, they're both gone. And
You're
we're
doing a
in
pretty
a
good
new,
impersonation
and
of
we're
them with the
in
same
a
policies
no
tonight.
very different. Look, I'm a very different person from Justin Trudeau. Focus is on results.
you his
and so
economic
how
advisor?
to drive results in the housing market? You've got to change the model of building. You've got to increase the financing for housing developers. $25 billion on the table for those housing developers. $10 billion for deeply affordable homes. Cutting development charges in half, lowering the cost of the building of those homes, and for decrease the financing for households in the housing market. You've got gone. And we're in a
Okay, Carney says what?
Get impersonation of them with the same policies tonight.
very different. Look, I'm a very different person from Justin Trudeau. Focus is on results.
you his
and so
economic
how
advisor?
to drive results in the housing market? You've got to change the model of building. You've got to increase the financing for housing developers. $25 billion on the table for those housing developers.
Increase financing for housing developers. 25 billion. Like that?
$10 billion for deeply affordable homes.
10 billion for deeply, whatever the fuck that means, affordable homes.
Cutting development charges in half, lowering the cost of the
Development charges cut development charges in half.
building of those homes by 20%. In cutting development charges in half, lowering the cost of the building of those homes by 20%, and lowering the emissions and the run costs of those homes by another 20%. This is how you drive affordability. This is how you bring
Cut development charges in half.
development charges in half, lowering the cost of the building of those homes by
It's tough to understand.
20%, and lowering the emissions and the run costs of those homes by another 20%. This is how you drive affordability. This is how you bring young people back into the housing
This
market.
is exactly what
Blanchet, and then
Trudeau
Mr. Singh.
You claim to be very different from Mr. Trudeau. Now, the point is to show that you are any better than Mr. Trudeau. You claim to have a lot of experience in many things, and you know things. Last time we had somebody saying that they knew things, it was the senators, and they killed the law that protected supply management because they knew better than us and were elected by nobody, exactly like you are today. You say that you are a great crisis manager. Which one? I heard of nothing. As far as I know, Brexit happened, even if you were against it. You say you are a great negotiator. What have you negotiated but fiscal paradises in Bermudas or Cayman Islands? You have to prove something, and you have to reveal what you own in those companies if you want people to believe you.
Mr. Singh, you wanted to.
Yes, returning to the topic of housing. Now, it's very important. Obviously, we need to build homes that people can afford. Mr. Poilievre had the opportunity to show us what he could do. He was the Minister of Housing under Stephen Harper. And during that time, guess how many homes he built? He built 6 homes during that entire time. This is not something you can trust to build homes. He built 6 homes. And this has been confirmed again and again. He built 6 homes. That's it. This is not something you can trust to build homes. He built 6 homes. Guess how many homes he built? He built 6 homes.
What's this? Pierre Poilievre built 6 homes. What is this? Pierre Poilievre as housing minister under Trudeau. Not Trudeau. Harper. Only about 6 homes. Yeah. Let's... The article is part of a reality check series by National Observer. Okay, during both leaders' debates, Jagmeet claimed that Pierre was only housing minister. Only about 6 homes. At one point, English debate, he even held up his hands, counted 6 while speaking to Pierre. It's a claim that has been stated before by Prime Minister during the questioning period. Do I have to listen to a podcast to do this? Dude, what is this fucking site? Like, is there a story here? 3-minute read. Let me read it then. Toronto Star. You guys, man, I fucking hate all these websites. Pardon my language. What the fuck? Why can't I find this? Perplexity. There was a claim that Pierre Poilievre only made 6 homes while he was a housing minister under Stephen Harper. Is that true? Where would I find this information? Phoenix in response by Okay, so yeah. I think the thing that I think about here is that I'm like, okay, so when he says X attacks on new homes incentivize me now to beat up this. Okay, so 6 homes is a meme. Perfect. Yeah, man, it's my first time really hearing any of these guys speak at any length. I think Jagmeet Singh is not a serious person. Expert briefs. Okay. Six home. Jagmeet says 6 homes built under Pierre. Man, I can't spell for shit, eh? Is that not how you spell Pierre? Wait. I swear that's how you spell Pierre. Pierre. As housing minister. Unserious claim. As Republican federal funding does provide to support the construction of nonprofit community cooperative. So this is in direct reference to nonprofit community. Which I think is, it's like, you know, he's talking about something different there, Jagmeet. Trying to. Rumor says the data excludes a sizable number of units for which Ottawa was funding partner and only includes units delivered or administered solely by the CMHC. In reality, he said the government has bilateral agreements with provinces and territories under which housing costs are shared, but the units are ultimately classified as being delivered by provinces and territories, not the federal government. So, okay. Numbers provided in response to only include units funded under programs delivered. Yeah, last report, right? Took it upon himself to get more accurate numbers, frustrated by the lack of publicity available and accurate data on social housing over the past 2 decades. He found that, yeah, okay. In conclusion, there's a lot more than 6. Paul Avery said he actually built 200 homes when he was minister. Seems to be yet another case shrouded in misleading context. Okay. Yeah.
In that entire time, this is not something you can trust to build homes. He built 6 homes. And this has been confirmed again and again. He built 6 homes. That's it. Now, the problem, though, with Mr. Carney as well, he's laid out a plan. The problem is that when he was the chair of Brookfield Investments, this is a company that made a strategic decision.
See, the issue with this is that it's like, dude, like, when you say something like that, it's like you're being unserious. And this is not about you. This is about the people. And so you want to give the facts as the facts. It's like, you know that the people that you're speaking to do not care to confirm or to confirm or reject your statements. And so when you say 6 homes, that's just a talking point for people around to talk about that. That's not even like a real thing, you know, because it has this caveat of, well, because of how these numbers are actually tracked, the only ones that were built under direct CMHC solely producing for nonprofit community homes was 6. It's like, that isn't what he's referring to. Most of the people of Canada are not wards of the state that need that. And that's not even to say that people that need that are wards of the state, but it's like, that's fundamentally who a lot of this housing is for. And those aren't the only people that are feeling the burdens of the unaffordability of this country.
To buy up affordable homes in cities like Toronto, where people were paying a decent rent. And they purposely bought those homes, kicked out the tenants, and jacked up the rents. That is not someone you can trust, sadly, to deal with the housing crisis when Mr. Carney, he profited off of it.
We're going to get responses here. Mr. Polyev first.
That's pretty
Where
interesting.
people were paying a decent rent. Though with Mr. Carney as well, he's laid out a plan. The problem is that when he was the chair of Brookfield Investments, this is a company that made a strategic decision to buy up affordable homes in cities like Toronto, where people were paying a decent rent. And they purposely bought those homes, kicked out the tenants, and jacked up the rents. That is not someone you can trust, sadly, to deal with the housing crisis when Mr. Carney, he profited off of it.
We're going to get responses here. Mr. Polyev first. Mr. Carney second.
First of all, Mr. Singh,
hold this up to remind you.
the Toronto
6 right
Star,
here.
the Toronto Star debunked your falsehoods
it was 6
on that.
homes, and
I
that's the
appreciate
facts.
neither Liberals or NDP are very good with math, but in that
You're
year,
clearly-
I
you
was
got up to
minister, if I
6, which is
could,
great.
the year
But
I
you got up to
was,
6,
Mr. Singh, let's let him answer.
in the year I
It's
was,
high enough, though.
the year I was minister, we had 200,000 homes built, and guess what the average price of a home was at the time? $450,000.
And guess what happened
And
at the end of the Conservative reign?
one bedrooms
It
rented out
doubled.
for $900, and that since that time, housing costs have actually doubled under the Liberals.
They doubled
And now
under
we
Conservatives, too.
have Mr. Carney making tens of billions of dollars of spending promises that
They
will
doubled on you
ultimately
as well.
continue to build bureaucracy. We don't need more bureaucracy in Ottawa. We tried that for 10 Liberal years, Mr. Carney. What we need is to build homes in communities.
Certainly
And
not
that
being
means
conservatives.
axing taxes on home building and getting the government out of the way so that builders can actually build.
I think,
Mr.
Mr. Carney,
Carney,
can I pick
you
up-
are on housing. We need
can
a
I-
change, and you, sir, are not a change.
I'm going to pick up on. I thought that answer was quite revealing. The first thing is that it's an attitude towards housing that absolutely ignores affordable housing, deeply affordable housing, issues with vulnerable people, ignores the rental market, ignores all other aspects of it. So the 6 are the relevant. Mr. Singh is absolutely right. The 6 are the relevant.
200,000.
The 200,000 are a different part of the housing market. There are many Canadians. There are many Canadians at different income levels. The second thing it reveals is a
I do like that he
misunderstanding,
brought up that
or
point.
well, a misunderstanding. I'll be polite. Of how the government's balance sheet can catalyze enormous private investment. And that is what we need to do to solve the housing crisis. It happens to be what we need to do as a whole to address the economic crisis that's been forced on us by President Trump.
Mr. Blanchet?
Yeah. You have spoken much more than I have, so I won't ask a question. I will make a statement instead. I'm not saying no. I'm not saying that you cannot do what you pretend that you are able to do. We just have no proof so far. I'm saying quite clearly that you cannot be entitled to do it alone. You cannot be entitled to hold all the power in your 2 hands. You cannot go out there and fix things for Canada and Quebec without being seriously checked by serious people. You cannot go out there and speak for Quebec without Quebec having its own strong voice to protect itself and to promote its different economy. So if you want to collaborate, let's say right now that whatever happens, even if minority government happens, you will be a partner with the different Quebec economy and identity, which you have been not interested in for the economic part and not respectful for the identity.
Let me get Mr. Singh in at this point. Can you tell us what's the first thing you would do to make life more affordable for Canadians?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that we can do, and I've laid out some of those things. I think fundamentally, I'm the only person on stage that not only fought for real relief for people in terms of affordability, I'm the only one that fought for pharmacare that actually makes life more affordable by giving people medication coverage, dental care that gives people more affordability by letting them access their services if you're a senior and a kid. I fought for childcare to make sure people could afford childcare. All measures that Mr. Poilievre voted against, all measures that Mr. Blanchet voted against. So if you want someone that's going to fight for you in Ottawa to actually make life more affordable, you can't entrust all the power to Mr. Carney. He doesn't have a track record of making life more affordable for people, but we do. So vote for a New Democrat, and we'll continue this work to make life more affordable for you. While the Conservatives and the Bloc have voted against those measures to make life affordable, because that's not who they care about, New Democrats are in it for you.
Pierre Poilievre.
The number one
My issue with that statement is that I'm like, does it make it more affordable? I think it actually, like, I don't think you understand how inflation works. It's like the more dollars in circulation, the more expensive things are. You're just saying, hey, we'll just give you more dollars. That doesn't make things more affordable. It actually makes things more expensive and just means that you have to issue more debt to pay for more things, which actually then just makes things more expensive.
expense for families today is taxes, more than they spend on food, clothing, and shelter combined.
As a Bitcoiner, I should probably actually support NDP because they would just print way more money. Is that walnut brain?
This after 10
It's a bad idea because it does not actually, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because if things are more expensive, it doesn't, it just means everything's more expensive, which is not good. We want more productivity.
10 years of liberal tax increases. We can't afford.
I feel like right now the issue is that I'm talking about the ideas that they're talking about, but it's like my opinions on these actually have no relevance. Like Pierre, who I think I'm like leaning towards right now, listening to this at least, because I feel like it aligns more with what I believe in, which is like, yeah, you actually need to make things like easier to do so that we as a country, each individual has the ability to just do things. This is a common meme right now. It's like you just want to do things. I think he's just saying, hey, we want people to be able to do things. And you know, amongst those is like, we want to incentivize homeowners or home builders to just do it. We want to tell municipalities like, yo, make it easier for people to build shit. Let's build some stuff. And by increasing the supply, you then lower the demand.
A fourth term of high liberal.
Will you ever be able to lower the demand? I don't know. Canada seems like a place that people want to live.
taxes. That's why conservatives have a plan for change. And that plan includes
voted
cutting
against every measure to help
if
people
I
out.
could, cutting income taxes by 15% for the average worker and
be
seniors,
really
saving
dope
a
if I could
working
actually
couple
just
up to
mute
$2,000, rewarding hard work again.
Or mute
Because hard
anybody
work
who's
is actually
talking while
being
they're-
punished. Is actually being punished because of the very high taxes. Now, the Liberals promised 10 years ago they would lower them. They actually raised taxes on 9 out of 10 Canadians. We need a change in this country because your hard work should once again pay off with a powerful paycheck that buys you an affordable affordable home
So you want to save
on a
people
safe street,
$2,000,
and that's what we will deliver.
You want to save people $2,000, but cut their dental care, which is
false.
$1,000.
False.
Cut their child care, which is $1,000. Cut pharmacare coverage, which is $1,000.
False.
That's not a very good math deal right there.
Dental and pharmacare. Maybe it's just like an implicit thing that I don't understand, like the cost structure of these things. And maybe it's just different in Alberta, but I'm like, dude, I pay for dental. I pay for this.
You're going to save people $2,000, but cost them tens of thousands of dollars. That's why you cannot afford conservatives, and you certainly can't trust the Liberals
Mark
on their
Carney's
own.
turn.
You need New Democrats.
Mark Carney.
I'm going to reinforce that point, and then I'll respond to Mr. Blanchet. Childcare in this country, $3,000 to $10,000 a year for a family, depending on where you live.
Province, jurisdiction.
Depending on where you live, that's what's being saved there. $800 per trip to the dentist. We've expanded dental care
Province,
to 8
jurisdiction.
million Canadians.
Because we forced-
That's what's being saved there. $800 per trip to the dentist. We've expanded dental
Province,
care to 8
jurisdiction.
million Canadians.
Because we
8
forced-
million
because
Canadians.
you Democrats are
Pharmacare.
Province jurisdiction. Interesting. Okay.
These are fundamental issues for affordability. We're talking about affordability and taking them off in order
That's why
to
you need
cut
Democrats.
taxes.
That's not what I've said.
And in
I will be
terms
cutting
of
income taxes
working with Quebec,
for Canadians.
yes, absolutely. Throughout the short time I've been Prime Minister, working directly with the Premier of Quebec, our Minister of Foreign Affairs, our Minister of Finance are from Quebec. Quebec and Quebec issues, whether it's
Well,
supply
to answer
management,
Mr.
language,
Legault's letter, he asked 5 things in the letter. He reduced his expectations.
We're talking about-
and you did not even answer him. And tonight, you are so much in love with Quebec.
Steve, the question that Canadians have to ask.
Why vote for
Whether-
conservatives?
why-
We're going to
why-
save
He's got
cost you tens of
Mr.
thousands.
Singh, sorry, he has the floor.
The question you have to ask is, after a decade of Liberal promises, can you
I'm
afford
glad the guy stood in and was like, yo, Mr. Singh, what the fuck, dude?
food? Is your housing more affordable than it used to be? What is your cost of living like compared to what it was a decade ago? And are you prepared to elect the same Liberal MPs, the same Liberal ministers, the same Liberal staffers all over again for a 4th term? Mr. Carney, Justin Trudeau's staffers are actually here with you at this debate in Montreal, writing the talking points that you are regurgitating into the microphone. How can we possibly believe that
That's
you are
painful.
any
Oh, well, that's
different
painful.
than the previous
Everybody has talking points that other people are writing for them here. Come on now.
10 years of Liberal
25
government?
seconds left in this segment for you to respond to that.
I do my own talking points. Thank you very much. The biggest risk we have to affordability, the biggest risk we have to this economy is Donald Trump. So first and foremost, we've got to get that right. Secondly, we need to do it in a way that brings everyone along together. That means preserving pharmacare, dental care, childcare, reinforcing healthcare, spending our whole
Intrusion,
social safety-
intrusion in
clock is
Quebec
on-
jurisdiction
the-
over and again. I like
the
if
clock
you
is
were
on
any
zero.
better than we are.
The clock
Is
is on
there
zero.
one thing Canadians can do that Quebecers cannot do? You are doing intrusions in our jurisdiction with our money, pretending you are better, and most of the time you try to copy what we did with our own money against us. What's that as a policy? Don't you have your own things to care
Gentlemen,
about?
that really is time for this segment. I wanted to be polite and let everybody finish their points,
I'm
but
far
we got to
beyond,
move
so
on.
I took the liberty.
Thank you. Okay, that ends section 2. Up next, public safety and security.
fight crime, to protect Canadians, and to build communities that are safe, secure, and strong.
Keep crime, drugs, stolen cars, and other illegal substances out of our country.
We're going to invest in our borders, and that means hiring more border officers.
Resources are in short supply, not enough staff. This is not the nice way to treat people who come to our border.
Okay, same format, one-on-one questions and then open debate. Mr. Blanchet, you get to go first in this one. Public safety and security. For a lot of people, that means the fentanyl crisis. I'd like to know what you could contribute to ending that crisis in this country.
The fentanyl crisis is a very serious issue, which is a bit less important in Quebec than it is in British Columbia. I think the whole border thing is the real issue. Immigration is a very important issue for Quebecers. Immigration has to be dealt with in an orderly fashion. Our borders are not dealt with in an orderly fashion. The rules are not respected. The rules are unclear. Some rules even invite people to hide for 2 weeks illegally before coming out. Some things has to be done. The situation of one person asking for asylum may take as much as 4 years without us reducing the number in order to deal with them in a human way. The services for every citizen in Quebec are being reduced because we cannot afford the fact that we are receiving much, much more people in Quebec from this specific type of immigration than we can afford, and we cannot teach them French.
That's time, Mr. Blanchet. We can, of course, return to the immigration issue during open debate should you
We
choose
will.
to. Mr. Carney, question for you. The Liberal gun buyback policy, not considered a success by many people. Reviving it is in your platform. Why would it work this time?
Yeah, I think, well, what we've seen with that policy is some success at the commercial level, but not at the individual level, because it hasn't been, in my opinion, it hasn't been organized properly, and it needs to be organized properly. And I've instructed the Minister of National Security and Public Safety in order to do that. So part of this is a different focus of government, a focus on results, a focus on clear milestones in the short term. Let me make a broader point, though, on gun, which is that we have a problem with guns coming over borders, which is why we tighten our borders. We have an issue, though, with a gun industry that is continually coming up with new forms of assault rifles, mass killing machines. We banned over 2,000 of these. Every single time there has been a vote in the House of Commons on gun control, Mr. Poilievre has voted against it. You can't be tough on crime unless you're tough on guns.
Mr. Poilievre, you can come back on that in the open debate if you want to, but my question for you in this segment is, Indigenous people are statistically overrepresented in our correction system. Are you concerned that your tough on crime platform will make that worse?
I'm concerned that Indigenous people are disproportionately the victims of crime. I'll give you the example of a wonderful group of Indigenous people who came under attack in Saskatchewan, and many of them were murdered. The killer was out of jail after 60 attack in Saskatchewan, and many of them were murdered. I'll give you the example of a wonderful group of Indigenous people who came under attack in Saskatchewan, and many of them were murdered. The killer was out of jail after 60 prior convictions. This is the result of 10 years of liberal laws that allow the same offenders to be released dozens and dozens of times, even when it's...
It's kind of annoying to me that Pierre just want to keep going back to this. This is the result of 10 years of liberal. I was like, oh, dude, shut up.
known they are a danger. We can't risk a fourth liberal term of soft on crime policies. We need to change. And the conservative plan...
I don't know if you guys ever watched that like Head of State movie with Chris Rock, but for whatever reason, one of the things that always sticks with me is this like this girl working in his. Maybe I need to watch it again, but the idea was kind of like horses. She grew up around the horse tracks. It was like horses have blinders on, so they can't look at the other horses. I'm like, yo, right now, Pierre, you're talking a little bit too much about the liberals, bro. You gotta run your own race. Just like talk about your shit. I don't really like the idea that it's most of his ideas seem to be like, they did this wrong, we're gonna do that better. Just be like, yo, sell me on the idea of what you're gonna do right instead of what you're gonna do better than them. I don't love that. I don't.
And for change. We'll bring in a 3 strikes you're outlaw. 3 convictions for serious crimes, you go to jail for at least 10 years, maybe for life, no chance of parole or bail. We will bring in life sentences for traffickers of fentanyl, human beings, and guns, and we will secure our borders to keep the illegal
Thank you,
guns
Mr. Poilievre. That's time. Mr. Singh, your question is about the RCMP, because you've got RCMP reform in your platform. What, in your view, is the problem with the RCMP?
Well, some of the basis for this is a concern that's been raised in more rural communities and northern communities that there have been some serious concerns about violence or inappropriate use of force when it comes to the execution of their duties. We want to make sure that we've got a top-tier police force that provides security and safety to those communities in a way that's sensitive and understanding of the communities they're serving. I also think what's very important is for Indigenous communities, Indigenous policing. This is an area of deep concern. I think everyone in our country should be safe. You should be able to be safe at home, safe when you go to work, safe if you take public transit, safe for your kids to be able to play in the local playground, and that's something I'm committed to. And the other area that I'm focused on when it comes to public safety is making sure we prevent crime before it happens, and that's why we want to see increased investments in our border security. We saw under the Conservatives, they cut 1,100 border officers in one day, so that prevented our ability to keep our border safe. That stops those
Okay,
materials
Mr.
from
Singh,
coming
that's time. Not sure it was about the RCMP, but maybe we can get back to that during the open debate segment, which we go to right now. And Mr. Poilievre, you get the first word on this one, and it sort of dovetails on the last answer you gave, which is back
happens to be able to play in the point in our country should be safe. You should be able to be safe at home.
I do like the moderator kind of dunks on him there. That's funny. Guys, I need a little break here. Let's throw this timer on real quick. I got to go to the washroom. Maybe make a cup of Joe.
One point where Poilievre was like, they asked him if we had meeting with security players, and he said, yeah, because I would be gay. And then Boris said, yeah, suddenly he said, I would be gay. But he said, like, yeah. But he sounded like he said, yeah. Then Martin Kennedy said, drinking water. Well, it's never drinking, it's like, but yeah, I mean, like, fun to it. Yeah, it was on at like 5 p.m. Pretty much like I never really did that. But no, so it's like 20 minutes earlier for fast. And then I love it. Break down what? You guys are just saying words, and like, there's one part where it's talking about like the affordability thing, and the guy was like, it's supposed to be you're talking about this is when he was the housing minister under Stephen Harper's government, he produced 6 homes, and I was like, 6 homes. Yeah, back, yeah, and then I'm looking, and it's like, oh yeah, this is just like a feed, and really what he means by 6 homes, what they're referring to is that the CMHC, Indian, but basically they mean some houses that are, I think it's supposed to be 2,000. Yeah, specifically it refers to community non-profit homes. Who wants to live in a non-profit, but like, as I do, like, you're just saying, that's literally just like some bullshit, but you know it's not actually what the person is saying. Yeah. It's like there's more people in Canada than this people. I'm not sure. I know. Don't bring me into this, man. Like, don't bring me into this. I'm like the fucking, yeah. I'm like the UN, you know? That's not the UN. It's like it to stand in here and do nothing. Thank you, right? It's good to be factual and bringing it down to straight some thoughts. I'll see what you might try to do. He's talking about the last 2 years. Yeah, it's right. Like, don't tell me I'm here to be better. Yeah, I mean, even Mark always kind of caught up to that fact that it's like, I know you want to think that Trudeau is here, but Justin's not here anymore. Yes, he doesn't have a good rebuttal. Not that like I care for this shit, because I mean that's what the debate ends up being. Right? You said this, and you said this. Is that actually informative? No, it's not. Yeah, and I think the person that's actually witty is like actually the Quebec guy. I found him like actually very sharp and like funny. I mean, it's interesting you said like in my opinion, I'm like there definitely seems to be allegiances of like the Bloc Québécois are just gonna dunk on Carney as much as they can. Jet Unique is just gonna try to dunk on Pierre, and Pierre's trying to dunk on the Liberal. And true, yeah. I think this is like, and Carney's not really dunking on nobody because they're like ahead of the polls. So like, all he really needs to do is stand ground, you know. Oh, this thing is growing. Oh. It is big. Yeah. For what? Too bad. It's when they execute. Oh. Someday to vape. So he hits the vape. What do you got here? What's this countdown? There's a timer. I'm gonna step away. Oh, okay, okay. Cool. All right. Nice. Let's go start. Oh yeah? Type shit. No, I'm good, man. Thanks so.
Safe when you go to work, safe if you take public transit, safe for your kids to be able to play in the local playground.
Dude, I love this one part of this debate where they're talking about public safety and security, and the moderator asks like, "What would you do to reform the MCMP or RCMP?" And he says this stuff, and then he finishes, and then the moderator is like, "Yeah, I'm not really sure that had to do with RCMP, but hopefully we get to that in the open debate." I was like, "Damn, moderator just dunked on him."
And that's something I'm committed to. And the other area that I'm focused on when it comes to public safety is making sure we prevent crime before it happens. And that's why we want to see increased investments in our border security. We saw under the Conservatives, they cut 1,100 border officers in one.
Because his response is like, "Oh, we're gonna increase investment in border security."
Oh, really? That's what Jack Meany's saying?
And then the guy's like, "Cool. Well, I'm not sure that had much to do with RCMP, but hopefully we get to the open debate." And he goes on to like try to like dunk on the Conservatives. And like one of the notes I made in my thing is that I'm like, that was fucking 10 years ago, dude.
Yeah.
Different world we're living in the last decade. Like,
Crime,
why the fuck are you bringing that up? You're talking about the like, oh, we need to do this. It's like, why are you not talking about the party that literally is in control?
Yeah, well, because they're coalition. It's funny. Actually, there was a clip. I don't know if you've seen it yet, but I don't know what they were talking about. They were talking about gas prices or something, or like cost of living or some bullshit. And Jack Meat was saying like, yeah, under the the conservatives, this has gone up, and then the Quebec guy, like the Bloc Québécois guy, was like, you voted for it. You voted for it. I was like, yo, it's like, and then Pierre's just trying not to laugh. He's just like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
I'll be back.
All right, man.
One day. So that prevented our ability to keep our border safe. That stops those
Okay,
materials
Mr.
from
Singh,
coming
that's time. Not sure it was about the RCMP, but maybe we can get back to that during the open debate segment, which we go to right now. Mr. Poilievre, you get the first word on this one, and it sort of dovetails on the last answer you gave, which is you have pledged to be the first prime minister in this country to use the notwithstanding clause, setting aside charter rights of, as you call them, multiple murderers. Why do you think that's necessary?
To be clear, I want to uphold the charter rights of Canadians under Section 7 to life, liberty, and security of the person. Right now, that right is violated by multiple murderers who are given discounts. The case in question was a gentleman who went into a mosque and shot dead 6 innocent worshippers. He got, according to this ruling, only one 25-year sentence, meaning he can be out in his 50s. He only serves 4 years for every murder that he carried out. That is outrageous. And I will use the constitutional powers that are created for this purpose to ensure that mass murderers stay in maximum security penitentiary for life. They will only come out in a box. We will also pass tough new laws that prevent repeat offenders from getting out. If you commit 3 offenses under the 3 strikes law I propose, you will not be allowed out of jail until you prove that you are drug-free, that you have behaved perfectly, and that you've learned an employable skill, and you've served a 10-year sentence. We cannot allow liberal crime and chaos to go on terrorizing our communities. What we need is a real plan for change so that we can bring back the safety and the security that Canadians used to take for granted.
Let me get Mr. Carney to respond to that. You think that's an appropriate use of the notwithstanding clause of the charter?
I think that one of the core responsibilities of the federal government, Prime Minister, is to defend the fundamental rights and liberties of Canadians. And those fundamental rights and liberties of Canadians are outlined in our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which is 43 years old literally today. I think it's a very dangerous slope to override judgments of the Supreme Court of Canada. In fact, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms exists to protect Canadians from people like us on the stage, politicians who may use their power to override fundamental rights. And the issue in using by the federal government, I'll stop here, is not where you start, but where will you stop?
Mr. Poilievre, I should get Mr. Poilievre on that. Is it a slippery slope if you use it in this case?
I must say, I would be quite interested too, because Mr. Carney said that he didn't want us to use the notwithstanding clause before adopting a law. And yesterday he said that he felt that it was wrong to use the notwithstanding clause after a law is adopted. So if we cannot use it before and we cannot use it after, it means that Mr. Carney believes that we should never use it. But it is very important. And the Ford case made it clear. The Constitution says how it should be used, but never how or what we will do with it, because it's the prerogative of the provinces. So do you want the Supreme Court to overrule another judgment of the same Supreme Court because you don't like it? Because that would be being the hell of a politician as you define them.
Well, let me just start by saying, first of all, thank you. I just started by saying, let's not let Mr. Poilievre get away with making this ludicrous claim that anyone on this stage thinks that violent crime should get a less severe penalty. Obviously, that is not a special position that he's taking. Everyone agrees that horrible crimes should have horrible sentences. Judges are equipped to do that. So don't let Mr. Poilievre's rhetoric confuse people. Obviously, everyone agrees that if someone does something horrible, they should pay a horrible price for it. There should be appropriate sentence that's put in place by a judge. But what I'm concerned about is all of what Mr. Poilievre is talking about is after the fact. Now, there's heinous things that happen, and there needs to be severe penalties put in place. But we also need to keep communities safe. And that's what my focus is. Well, how do we stop crime before it happens? Much of the violent crime that's committed is committed by illegal handguns and firearms that come across the border. Now, Mr. Poilievre admitted that as well, that it is illegal handguns and illegal weapons that are used in violent crime. So our plan is let's stop those illegal weapons getting into our country in the first place. And the way we do that is by having stronger border security officers and having more people on the border. Mr. Pierre Poilievre, when he was in power in the Conservatives, they cut the number of border officers. They reduced the number, weakening our borders.
Keeping an eye on time
Can't
here.
trust them.
Let's get back to Mr. Poilievre on the issue of whether in using the notwithstanding clause under these circumstances would be a kind of a slippery slope and encourage politicians to use it more.
No, we will use it to protect the charter rights of law-abiding Canadians. I'm interested in the rights of victims. Mr. Carney seems to be very interested in the rights of criminals. He says that it's dangerous for me to ensure that mass murderers stay behind bars for life. You know what's dangerous? Turning them loose on our streets. I don't think you appreciate, sir, the chaos that is unfolding in communities. In Toronto right now, the police have been forced to tell people to just let the thief steal the car. When they break into the house, just take the keys. Just let them take the keys so that you don't get hurt. People are living in terror in many of our communities precisely because of the catch and release bail law, C-75, which requires judges release the accused at the earliest opportunity under the least onerous conditions. Every single member of your Liberal caucus and your Liberal cabinet voted in favor of this bill, and they are all determined to keep it in place despite constant promises to the contrary. Mr. Carney, Canadians deserve to live in peace and security. That is the right that I'm fighting for a change.
I'm fighting for that as well. And let me be specific about 2 things that have been raised. The first is with respect to these issues of car theft, home invasion, and I'll use the GTA area where there has been a sharp increase. How do you attack that? You attack it several ways. One, you increase the criminal penalties for that happening, particularly if you're part of a gang, particularly if you use a firearm.
And you will do that?
And we've doing so. We've committed to doing so. You put in place a reverse onus in terms of bail, so that it has to be proven that there's not a risk, which we've also committed to. And then you go to what Mr. Singh was talking about, which is we have to reinforce our frontiers. That's why we're committing to an extra 1,000 Canada Border Service agents, an extra 1,000 RCMPs. That's why, as part of the broader fentanyl initiative, where we've added to the RCMP there, we've added drones, we're adding helicopters, we're adding surveillance, and we're going to the other end of the chain with respect to cars of the chain.
And in some of the Carney and more investment, we need to
Association, whatever else being stolen, sale being by those gangs.
Sold?
And not sold, being, purchased a thing and selling, sold by those gangs. And we mostly have to protect our kids from being recruited by those gangs, becoming violent at 13 and 14 and 16 years old, because this is the real fear of parents like I am. This is a very dangerous situation. I want to come back to immigration because we said that we would come back to immigration. Do you remember the Century Initiative, a sad memory? Officially, they said that they had not considered Quebec difference. They had not considered Quebec language. They wanted Canada to be a 100 million people country by the end of the century. Mr. Barton told me himself that he had not even thought about the Quebec difference in that analysis. And one of his closest collaborators is now a close counselor to Mr. Carney, which seems to be part of that kind of project or ideology. So it is impossible for Canada to have all those people coming to Canada. It is impossible for Quebec to receive all those people. And in Quebec, we have the language and values and secularity of the state issue, which is very important. So I say, pause. Let's do things properly. Let's receive migrants in an orderly fashion and successfully as a measure of respect for them also.
Ms. Poilievre, you want a word?
I speak to families all the time who are terrified by the scourge of drugs and illegal guns. And we know those guns are not Grandpa Joe's hunting rifle. So when the Liberals try to ban hunting rifles, they're really going after the wrong people. 90% of guns that come in that are used in crime are smuggled illegally over the porous, Liberal-run borders. And that's why the police, it's not true, and that's why the police actually, if I could, the police actually endorsed me. The police in Barrie, in Peel, in Sault Ste. Marie have all endorsed me because they know that I will go after the gun smugglers and criminals with 2,000 extra frontline border guards that will stop the guns from coming in. But unlike the Liberals and NDP, I will not ban hunting rifles. The Liberals want to protect, I want to protect Canadians from criminals. The Liberals want to protect turkeys from hunters. I think we know which one makes more sense.
Quick intervention, Ms. Carney, then I got a question for each of you before this segment's out.
Okay. We absolutely fully support hunting rights of hunters and Indigenous Canadians. But I'm going to raise an issue, which is a serious issue, talking about safety. There are people, we're in Montreal, in Toronto, across this country, who fear going to their synagogue, fear going to their community center, fear taking their children, leaving their children in school. And this has to stop. This is it's totally unacceptable. So what we're proposing is to make it a criminal offense to threaten or to impede anyone from being near or going to their place of worship, their school, their community center. This, it pains me that when we have to do it, because this is not what we should be doing as Canadians, of course, but we will put that in place. Let me get back. And this is a fundamental issue with
Let me get 10 seconds from each of you before the segment's out on what you perceive to be the biggest security threat to Canada right now. 10 seconds each. Ms. Poilievre.
The physical security threat to our country is the rampant crime wave that is running out of control. After the last decade, we had a 116% increase in gun crime. We need to lock up the criminals.
I got to hold you to 10 seconds. Ms. Carney?
Well, we're in a security section. I think we didn't have a chance to talk about anything internationally. I think the biggest security threat to Canada is China.
China, you say. Mr. Singh.
Biggest security threat, illegal guns and drugs coming across the border, and cuts to services that would make our public safety and security even worse.
Last word to Mr. Blanchet.
The fact that neither Quebec or Canada is able to protect itself and that we are still dependent and entirely dependent on Americans to protect us.
Okay, that is the end of that section. Gentlemen, up next, energy and climate.
Improving pipelines, getting things built.
I saw in context. We're talking about what our energy solutions are in the context of a climate low public money. There's not any.
And so here we go. Mr. Singh, to you first. Should Canada build new pipelines to get our oil and gas to market?
Well, it's not an approach I favor with public money. There's not any projects that are on the table, so there's not a specific project to look at. I favor, when it comes to the environment, building an east-west energy grid that connects low-cost energy and allows for families to reduce their electricity costs. But let's put this all in context. We're talking about what our energy solutions are in the context of a climate crisis. And we're not just talking about a climate crisis in the far future. We're living it right now. I remember I met a mom a couple years ago before I had kids who told me she was worried about taking her kids out on some days because of the forest fires in BC. It meant that it was unsafe for kids to go outdoors. Fast forward to when I became a parent just a couple years after that, and I literally worried about the same thing. The forest fires we saw a couple years ago meant that many places that didn't see this before saw days where there was such smoke in the air that it was dangerous for kids. We see extreme weather, forest fires, heat domes, floods impacting us. We've got to do everything we can to
Thank you,
protect our
Mr.
future.
Singh. That's time. Ms. Poilievre, where does fighting climate change land on your list of priorities when it comes to expanding energy opportunities in this country?
It lands within our priorities of bringing home jobs while bringing down emissions around the world. Look, the reality is that if we push production out of our country to more polluting countries, it actually makes the problem worse. But that has been exactly the Liberal approach with the anti-development law, C-69, blocking of 15 LNG export plants over the last 10 years. We have seen more of those jobs go abroad. I want to bring them home. My plan will be to approve, for example, natural gas liquefaction and export. If we sent our gas to India, for example, to displace half of their demand for electricity, we could reduce emissions by 2.5 billion tons, which is 3 times the total emissions of Canada. That's the way we bring emissions down and jobs up. It's common sense, and now it's time to bring it home.
Thank you, Mr. Poilievre. The next question is for Mr. Carney. How would your government fast-track pipelines and mining projects while also following the Supreme Court decision that requires consent of Indigenous communities?
Well, I think the first thing, and this goes back a bit to where we started, which is recognizing that we are in a crisis. We need to act with maximum force and having a process and a consultation, but a consultation with a purpose, which is to identify those projects, those investments of national interest that are really going to move the dial in terms of growth, jobs, energy security, well-being consistent with long-term competitiveness, which necessarily means lower carbon. And so part of that process is ensuring that First Nations, Indigenous peoples, are there from the start. It also includes their ability to participate fully in those projects, and that's why, and I know I can tell, you've got to tell them when I've gone on too long, so I'll finish up, which is that's why we're doubling, our proposal is to double the Indigenous Loan Guarantee Program to $10 billion. What does that actually mean? It means an ability for them to invest equity in those projects and be full partners. Thank you.
My tell is my clock, and my clock is at 0, so that's how it goes. Mr. Blanchet, do you still oppose pipeline construction in Quebec, even though a majority of Quebecers now apparently say they support it?
We will know about that when we have held the debate about that, which has not begun yet. We are just beginning it. First, we are hearing very creative numbers, and we are being fed nonsense. And we will be back to it in a few minutes. But energy, trade, commerce is from south to north or north to south, and it's true in Quebec also. In a little more than 3 years, Donald Trump won't be in office, and there will be not one more pipeline having been built once we get there. So let's be serious, responsible, and we will be back with the numbers we don't want to pay in Quebec for such monstrosities, which will provide us with nothing.
We now move to open debate, and you all will get a chance, or have had a chance, to get the first shot at this. Monsieur Blanchet, it is your turn to get the first shot. Canada has a substantial supply of critical minerals, which are in high demand. Are you in favor of allowing these minerals to be mined?
Of course, it has to be done properly. Quebec has probably the most important clean phosphate reserves in North America. In Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean, it is very important. It has to be exploited. This is the best way to use Paul Saguenay as an infrastructure that we need. We have lithium. Everybody needs lithium. Transportation has to be taken from oil to clean energy. This is what we want to be working on. It is part of the specificities, specifics of Quebec economy. So we are in favor of that. But we don't want to pay for the $30 billion which have been spent on oil and gas by the Liberals last year. It's $7 billion from Quebec. We don't want to pay for the $40 billion which have been spent by the Liberals on Trans Mountain. It's $9 billion from Quebec. Those are $16 billion of which not $1 has been spent in Quebec to develop a lot more power and wealth for Quebecers with our own money.
We need to let the leader of the Liberals respond.
Well, actually, I was going to pick up on the enormous opportunity that exists in Quebec, exists in Ontario, exists in the north of Canada, really exists across this great nation in terms of critical metals and minerals. We are have one of the biggest resources in this country. And it's not just an enormous economic opportunity, it is a strategic opportunity for Canada. So we have to make a decision, not just to develop it, but how do we develop it and who are our partners for it? Do we become more dependent on the United States, which is what they want? By the way, President Trump this week said he might put a tax on critical metals and minerals, just showing again.
Yeah, but the job is not to-
and so the discussions
to negotiate.
if I may finish. Let me finish. So the opportunity includes in Europe and includes in Asia as our partners. Last point. In order to get it done, we'll put in place a first and last mile fund. So these projects are connected to road and rail, so they can go quickly to market. And we will have all of the other fast tracking measures in place that I talked about earlier in terms of capital, timing, approvals, so that we can move quickly, we can be stronger at home.
Always
Mr. Singh,
Yeah, I
Mr. Singh
think
has the floor.
we should absolutely take advantage of the fact that we've got incredible amounts of critical minerals in our country. And the way we do that is with any energy project or any project of this nature, make sure it's got the local community buy-in, it creates good jobs in communities, make sure we are meeting all our environmental needs, and we work with Indigenous partnership. And so I absolutely agree with that. I want to build on something Mr. Blanchet mentioned about the investments that this country has made. What I found very troubling is that the past number of years, the Liberal government record is one where we have spent the most subsidies compared to any other country in the G7 on subsidizing oil and gas. These are highly profitable companies.
You
I think
voted
that's
for
the
it.
wrong thing to do. We fought against it again and again,
No, you voted
and then
for
the
it.
Liberals have continued
Over
to
and
do
again.
it. And so my question really to Mr. Carney is, will you commit to ending oil and gas subsidies? We should be using that to invest in people, not giving it to highly profitable oil and gas companies.
Yeah, we talk.
I promise Mr. Polyev next. We'll come back and get that question answered. Mr. Polyev.
Well, Mr. Carney, you point out that Donald Trump has a wrong-headed idea of putting a tax on our mines and our industry. And that is wrong. But so do you. You want to apply a massive industrial carbon tax on Canadian mines, Canadian steel mills, Canadian aluminum plants,
You wanna let this
Canadian
explain
oil and gas plants. And your idea is to double the tax that Trump is applying by hitting them a second time. This will do nothing for the environment. It will actually ship our jobs south of the border,
Mr. Polly's
just
plan is let
like
them pollute as much as they
President
want.
Trump
Not a good
wants. My plan is to bring that production home here to Canada. For example, I will give a tax credit to low-emitting Canadian industry like Quebec's aluminum, for example, or British Columbia's natural gas, so that we not only bring home the production, but we do it below global average levels of emissions, so that
translate
we
that.
actually help the environment while bringing
Let's
home the
let
jobs
them
for our
lose food.
people
We have to let
at
them
the same time. That is a sensible, pragmatic approach that puts us in charge of our economic destiny, so we can stand up to the Americans from a position of strength for a change.
Mr. Carney, hang on a second. I want to give you a chance to speak to Mr. Singh's criticism about oil and gas subsidies and Mr. Polyev's criticism about the industrial carbon tax.
Okay, I'm going to make 3 points. I'll make 4 if you want me to respond to that, but I want to make 3. The first is that I answered this question last night, but I think the puck had already dropped in the Canadians game, so not everyone heard it. Yes, end oil and gas subsidies.
That's why you need to-
Secondly, I would have done it independently. Secondly, recognizing that the biggest component of that was the cost of building Keystone. Keystone, which is the pipeline which has helped to increase oil and gas oil exports by 50% in this country. That is an asset of the people of Canada. We own it. The question of what to do it. So it's not a subsidy that has disappeared. It's actually an asset of Canada. The third point, though, in terms of where the oil and gas industry, particularly the oil industry, wants to and needs to go, which is to become low carbon in production and transportation of oil. One of the big projects we need to move forward with is carbon capture and storage, the Pathways project, so that we have oil and gas that is competitive, not just today, 10 years from now, and 20 years from now, as the world uses less. We want to have more market share. We need to do that. My government will move that.
By definition, a subsidy isn't when we buy a pipeline. I'm talking about subsidies that go to oil and gas companies. Independent, separate from the country, oil and gas companies. That's what
The
I'm
figure
talking
you
about.
quoted last night included the cost of the pipeline.
Do you want to address
Billions
his
of dollars
point?
are spending, we got to stop spending.
Sorry, can we get you to address his point about the industrial carbon
How
tax?
much will the industrial carbon tax add to the price of a car?
So the first thing I want to say is I'm going to address the broader point. The broader point is the entire absence of a climate plan from Mr. Polyev, which, by the way, is going to put our industry and our country at a disadvantage as we're looking for new trading partners. Guess what? Most people want to deepen our partnership in Europe, in Asia. Those countries care about whether or not you've made progress. Second thing is we're designing a program so that the big polluters pay Canadians at home for making responsible climate choices, for retrofitting their home, getting their emissions down, or improving otherwise. And that is smart climate policy. It's better for the big polluters and it's better for Canadians.
Pierre Polyev.
Mr. Carney didn't answer my question. I asked how much would the industrial carbon tax on Canadian steel add to the price of a car. He won't answer because he knows that it will be very expensive because there's lots of steel in cars. Now, while Mr. Carney has temporarily
But you know the answer?
hidden the
You know the
carbon
answer
tax,
either. You're
is
just throwing out
thousands of
random
dollars, thousands of
Just
dollars.
make it up.
extra
Okay,
costs.
that's-
that-
When you
actually, I do know the answer. The question's wrong.
when you add taxes to steel, you raise the price of everything that uses steel. When you add everything taxes
strong argument to say you know the price,
when
you
you
know the
add
price.
when you
You don't
add
answer.
when you add the carbon tax onto the price of, for example, fertilizer, you increase the price of food. So while Mr. Carney has temporarily hidden the liberal carbon tax at the pumps while keeping the tax fully in law and planning to raise it after the election, he's also going after a tax on our industry that will ultimately be passed on to you. After a lost liberal decade of rising costs, we cannot afford a fourth liberal term. We need a new government that will fully axe the carbon tax, increase the jobs that we have here in Canada, and bring down your cost of living.
We've got just a little over 3 minutes left in this segment. So, Mr. Singh, I want to ask you, do you think climate change is still a priority from Canadians? You're out there. What are you hearing?
Absolutely. You speak to any young person and they think, we're seeing climate crisis in front of us happening right now. You speak to seniors who say, we used to be able to live in our homes without air conditioning, and now we're seeing heat crises in communities that never had worries about extreme weather. We're seeing flooding, we're seeing forest fires like never before. We're living in a climate crisis. So Canadians are absolutely worried about it. As soon as we come into a summer, we start seeing those forest fires again. It's top of mind for Canadians because they're living it, they're seeing it. And I want those Canadians to know, Mr. Carney is not going to end those fossil fuel subsidies unless I'm there to fight back. Mr. Poilievre wants to let big polluters pollute as much as they want, poison our beautiful land, our water, our air. He wants to let them dump into our oceans. I'm going to fight back and defend our environment.
Monsieur Blanchet, on the issue of whether or not people still care about climate change.
I think people should be kept very informed about climate change because we are in a very strange denial situation about climate change, which still exists and is very expensive. And I'm sorry to crash your party, guys, but you are telling fairy tales. Clean oil and gas is a fairy tale. Large-scale carbon sequestration, sorry, I'm French, is a fairy tale. It does not exist. If Alberta wanted to exploit oil and gas and it were not a matter of pollution, I wouldn't mind at all. That's their business. Our own powerhouse in terms of energy in Quebec is clean energy. We are the best place in the world to achieve that. Our market is the northeastern part, Democrat part of the United States. We want to keep our money to create wealth in Quebec for Quebecers. Let us be different because we can afford to be
Blanchet, let me give, I will get to you because I said I would, but you've taken a couple of hits here and I want to give you a chance to respond to some of the things the people on this side of the stage have said.
Thank you. Well, first of all, we do support protecting the environment. We want to ban the dumping of raw sewage into our waters. We want to hold large corporations to high environmental standards to protect our water and air. But we cannot do that by raising taxes and sending jobs overseas, as Mr. Carney is proposing to do. That has been the approach of the last 10 years of the Liberal government. What the biggest companies that develop our resources say is that we need to repeal the Liberal anti-development law C-69, a law Mr. Carney wants to keep in place. They say we need to repeal the industrial carbon tax and get rid of the Liberal energy cap. We need 6 months approval in order to take back energy security and energy sovereignty.
Mr. Carney,
last word, Mr. Carney, in a second, please.
Thank you very much. I was born in Fort Smith in the Northwest Territories, just north of what the oil sands became. When I was born and when I was growing up in Edmonton, early days, it was a fairy tale, quote unquote. But you know what happened? Canadian ingenuity, Canadian engineers, Canadian governments, both the federal government and the Alberta government got together and converted this.
The worst pollution
If I
in
may,
the world. The worst
may I
pollution in
finish?
the
May I
world.
finish? May I finish?
10 more seconds to finish, please. Let me finish this point.
That's the opportunity we have. That's the opportunity we have in carbon capture. That's the opportunity we have in small modular reactors. That's the opportunity we have in hydrogen beyond. This country can be a clean energy superpower. My government will help deliver.
And that is time for the segment. Gentlemen, let us go to our final theme, which is called Leading in a Crisis.
Canadians know how to weather a storm. Canadians know how to get through a difficult time.
If, at the end of the day, we end up with the balance of power, Quebec is
when someone else.
To it, get us to a balanced budget in 3 years. Question is, how?
So let me put this in the context of leading in a crisis, which is in a crisis, you got to plan for the worst. Worst is that the U.S. actually does want to take us over. Secondly, you got to have a plan to build, and that'll include a fiscal plan, and I will get to that in a second. The third thing is you need to respond in a crisis with overwhelming force. You need to think big. You need to move rapidly. The things we've been discussing today are a subset of what we can and should do as a nation, and we can deliver. And government can play a role, but its role has to be catalytic. And so our approach is that we will slow the rate of spending. It's been growing at 9% a year, operational spending, program spending, away from transfers into 9% a year. We'll slow that to 2%. We will focus on a small amount of capital spending by the federal government in order to drive enormous private investment up to $500 billion by 5 years.
Thank you, Mr. Carney. Ukraine surely constitutes a crisis. Leading in a time of crisis, Mr. Poilievre, question for you. If the United States withholds support from Ukraine going forward, do you believe Canada should commit more to assist?
I believe we should continue to support Ukraine. Our party supported donating missiles that the Canadian military was decommissioning. We supported funds and other armaments to back the Ukrainians in the defense of their sovereignty. We also need to rebuild our own Canadian military because the Russians want to make incursions into our waters. We'll be buying 4 massive Arctic icebreakers. I'll be opening the first Arctic base since the Cold War in Canada, CFB Iqaluit. We're going to double the size of the Arctic Rangers and fill the vacancies in our Canadian armed forces. We need a change to rebuild our military, which has been so disintegrated under the cuts and the mismanagement of the last 10 years. But we can have a change because we have the best soldiers, sailors, and airmen in the world, and they will have full backing from my government if you give me the honor of becoming Prime Minister.
I may come back to that one in the open forum because I'm not sure we got an answer about Ukraine on that one, but okay. Going on. Mr. Blanchet.
The answer was yes.
We'll get more details perhaps as we go forward. Mr. Blanchet, given the U.S. trade war, should any talk of a referendum on Quebec independence be put on pause?
That one is easy. It will happen only after the negotiation is over, and that's a good thing. I want to say I support the idea. We must help Ukraine, but we also must help the civilians of Gaza, and we must destroy Hamas, which is a terrorist organization. You know what? I don't want to be the leader of Canada. You will understand that. I don't want to be Prime Minister. But I can offer to be a partner, a responsible partner, a collaborative partner. If Quebec is respected in its differences, in its aluminum industry and lumberwood industry and culture and French language and values of secularity of the state, which is the price to be paid in order to have real equality, Then, if we are respected, we will be a partner, and then even Canada will be stronger in its negotiation against Donald Trump. This is what I am offering. Respect us.
Mr. Singh, I watched last night's debate. You seem very eager to talk about healthcare, so let's talk a little more healthcare right now. You have made many promises on healthcare. If a province says to you, we'll take your money for healthcare, but not your conditions on how to spend it, what do you do?
We've got to negotiate. We can't be giving away money without clear conditions. We're in a healthcare crisis right now, a crisis that is hurting people across this country. People are waiting desperately in line in emergency rooms for hours and hours. Seniors are waiting for years and years to get the care that they need for surgeries that would remove pain or help them deal with mobility issues. We're in a serious crisis. Healthcare workers are burnt out. They are overstretched. And what we're seeing is more and more privatization, and that is hurting our public universal healthcare system. So we've got to fight back against it. We cannot allow our public money to go to a for-profit private clinic lining the pockets of a rich CEO or investors instead of going towards care. We need to make sure that we are investing in solutions where care gets to people, not profiting those at the very top. And so that's my commitment. I'm going to fight to make sure we defend our healthcare against the threats of Americanization and privatization.
Okay, we now go to open forum debate, and perhaps, Mr. Poilievre, you get the first word here. This might be a good time to put a little more flesh on the bone of what you think Canada could do for Ukraine if the U.S. backs out.
Yes, and my answer is that we should continue to support Ukraine. We don't need to follow the Americans in everything they do. When they're wrong, then we will stand on our own and with other allies. And with respect to Ukraine, that of course includes support with intelligence, equipment, armaments, but it also includes defunding Putin. Right now, Vladimir Putin has a monopoly on the European energy market because, frankly, the Liberals blocked exports of Canadian natural gas off the Atlantic coast. They blocked multiple projects. I would rapidly approve those projects on national security grounds so that we can actually ship Canadian natural gas over to Europe, break European dependence on Putin, defund the war, and turn dollars for dictators back into paychecks for our people.
Mr. Carney, you wanted to add?
Well, I want to go to the situation in Ukraine because it's very important. We've been a steadfast, Canada's been a steadfast ally, and Canadians have stepped up, welcoming Ukrainians into their homes and supporting them in other ways. You know, in my first month as Prime Minister, we joined the coalition of the willing to support Ukraine as the U.S. stepped back. So led by France, the United Kingdom, with Ukraine, number of European nations, Australia, ourselves, New Zealand. That's an example of how the new world is going to be. Canada participating in these areas and helping. It also means open trade. Mr. Poilievre voted against free trade agreement with Ukraine. It means aid for Ukraine. Mr. Poilievre wants to cut foreign aid, including for Ukraine, or not. Didn't mention support for aid for Ukraine. We have to stand by them. We have to be there, and this government has been.
Mr. Singh.
New Democrats absolutely support standing with Ukraine and will continue to do that. But I appreciate the opportunity in talking about leadership in crisis, talk about many of the crises we're up against. And one of the crises we're up against in our country with the threat of Donald Trump, with the threat of the trade war, and with the privatization and Americanization of our healthcare system is the healthcare system. And what we have learned today, you know, Mr. Carney mentioned slowing operation spending. That's a cut to services. He said his plan. He has a plan to balance the operating budget within 3 years. That's going to require massive cuts to spending. We calculated that at $43 billion in cuts. In fact, Rosemary Barton, when he was on the show on February 16th, he said he would cut spending. He said it would be in operations. He defined it as transfers and health. And finally, longtime Liberal and former House Leader Karina Gould said that Mr. Carney's plans would mean massive cuts. That's the only way to achieve it. So, Mr. Carney, do you think it is leadership to cut healthcare at a time when it is in crisis? I think it's wrong. We can't do that.
We will not cut transfers for healthcare. We will not cut healthcare spending full stop.
But Mr. Carney, who do we believe? Mr. Carney today, or the one he spoke on Rosemary Barton show on February 16th, the one that repeated again that he would cut spending? Who do we believe?
If I may, consistently said, we'll preserve all transfers to the provinces, including the increases. We will preserve all the transfers to individuals, I won't detail them all, but they're there. So we're looking at addressing an operational spend, which is about $150 billion. We will address that. We will make it more efficient, and we'll do it in 3 years, and we'll balance that budget.
I am 6 minutes behind Mr. Carney, so I will speak a little bit longer. First, I will support any initiative which will bring Canada aligned with Europe and NATO in order to be stronger and facing new threats. I believe that 2% won't be enough. I'm not more in favor of war than anybody else, but we have responsibilities, and our main ally is removing himself from the stage. So we have to step up. We have to do our part. I want to go somewhere else entirely, however. I want to ask Mr. Carney, if we're speaking about leadership here, if Quebec and Canada were to say, you are not being given a majority government, there will be more conservatives than you would like, maybe more New Democrats than you would like, and more people from the bloc than you would like. Will you accept, because you don't seem to be very eager about that, to deal with people which basically are more experienced than you are, as legitimate as you are, and would be more representative altogether than you would be being alone in your little kingdom? And I want also to propose to you all guys that 1 week after the election, we all meet, whatever the results, and we start dealing with this crisis together, because this is what people, either they are from Alberta or Quebec or wherever, this is what people expect from us.
Mr. Carney, is that something you could get behind?
I look forward to meeting with everyone. You're welcome to come, Steve, if you like. Week after twice.
That's not very respectful.
No, but I'm coming. Un peu jaser, un peu. Okay, I come to the core. Yeah, okay, I'll come to the core. Look, in a crisis, yes, you need a team, and you need to bring the country along with you. So what I did in the first week was to bring the premiers together, meet with all the Indigenous leaders, and move forward in that context. Now the question is, who's going to lead out of this? Whoever leads out of this, if I may, Mr. Blanchet, thank you. Whoever's going to lead out of this is going to need to work with all the provinces, work with Labour, work with Indigenous leaders, work with all Canadians to bring them forward in a united front. And if I make this last point, one of the things that has happened, which is a credit to those people at home, is that Canadians are coming together. And it's our responsibility to meet the strength of Canadian unity.
Still, I have one small point to make. You will be elected, if you are elected in a parliament where there are other leaders. I don't know if he called you, or Mr. Poilievre, I don't know if he called you, but before yesterday, you have not spoken to me once even if I proposed it so many times. But you say I speak to provinces' leaders. You're not elected in provinces. You are in a parliament where people are to make decisions which might not always suit you. But this is democracy,
Mr. Blanchet,
which you don't know too much about.
I'm going to jump in here because I'm noticing what the clock is saying, and you brought up Gaza earlier, and I think our audience would be interested in hearing your views on the other major international crisis facing the
I just
world
want
right
to get
now.
this, before we get there, just to finish up on the healthcare, I just want to speak to healthcare workers right now who are deeply worried about the status of our healthcare system, to Canadians who believe and love our universal public healthcare system, to patients who are stressed out. If you're worried about which Mr. Carney to believe, the one today or the one who spoke on previous shows and said he would cut, vote for New Democrats, and we will fight to defend our healthcare.
I think your
We'll never
supporters
let
would really
anyone
like
cut
to
it.
hear what you have to say about this question, and we have less than 5 minutes for it here. What role should Canada play in the other major international crisis in this world, in the Middle East and the war in Gaza? Pierre Poilievre, would you start us off on that? What role can Canada play?
Well, first of all, we must condemn Hamas, and more importantly, the terror sponsors in Tehran who initiated the attacks, the horrific attacks of October 7th. We need to defeat the terrorists so that all the peoples of the world can live in peace, and to defend the right of, yes, Palestinians to have their own lives free from the oppression of Hamas dictators and Iranian intervention, while Israel has the ability to live in freedom and peace. But I also want to say, we need to get back to the Canadian tradition, which is that when people come to this country, they leave foreign conflicts behind. The rampaging riots targeting Jewish communities is utterly unacceptable, and it points to the growing chaos that we see on our streets after 10 years of incredibly irresponsible liberal policies, of weak borders, of dividing people into groups, of saying one thing to one group and the opposite to another, dividing and conquering. We must end that division and unite our people so that everyone feels safe, and that when we come here, we put our foreign conflicts behind and we put
That's
Canada
not people.
first.
People come from countries from around the world, and they care deeply about where they come from, and they should be able to do so. That's a part of being in our country, to have that freedom. Your treatment of Palestinians has been frankly disgusting. Your treatment of people who provide care and service for people in Gaza has been disgusting. On top of that, people in Israel and in Palestine deserve to live in peace and security. And Mr. Carney, to date, you've not acknowledged that what's going on in Gaza is now clearly become a genocide. It's important to call things out as they are, and you've not done that.
Mr. Carney.
We need to work, to go to your question, we need to work with our international partners, maximum pressure, maximum encouragement for an immediate ceasefire. That's the first thing. Encourage the return of all of the hostages. Resumption of humanitarian aid. My government put in place $100 million of humanitarian aid, which is ready to go. With respect to where this ultimately goes, yes, two-state solution, but it has to be a viable and free Palestinian state, living side by side in peace and security with the state of Israel. I will underscore one other thing. Mr. Poilievre rightly mentioned Iran. The Iranian sponsors in this region, we have to be clear-eyed about the fundamental risks of Iran and do everything with our international partners to check it and turn it.
Mr. Blanchet.
If we are to work together, we will have to be consistent. The Jewish community in Quebec and Canada is harassed by a very little minority of radical Islamists. And we don't do so much. The law in Canada says that somebody may invite people to be violent, to propose genocide against another people, if they can be hidden behind a religious motivation. They are in agreement with that, they are in agreement with that, they are in agreement with that. And we say it is a crime to invite people to violence and killing other people, and this is what is being done very often in Canada and Quebec with the approval of the Criminal Code of Canada. And we are saying this has to be changed. We have to change what we do before we want people elsewhere to change what they do.
Last minute in the segment, Mr. Poilievre.
This is about crises and leadership. And one crisis we have is in immigration. Because of this Liberal government's commitment to a radical policy called the Century Initiative, which seeks to bring our population up to 100 million people, they have allowed massive overcrowding in our communities. That has caused housing shortages, job
Don't
shortages,
blame
and
immigration
healthcare
for the fault
shortages.
of your government.
And if I could,
The fact that you did
sorry,
not
I didn't interrupt you.
housing.
I did
You
not
built 6
interrupt you,
homes.
sir. I did not
That's
interrupt you.
small. Don't
And
blame
I do not blame
your
I
failures.
could.
Let him finish.
I do not blame immigrants. I blame the Liberal government, which brought this policy on. And Mr. Carney wants to continue with the Century Initiative. This is crazy. We have to get back to normal levels of immigration, get rid of the fraud in the temporary immigration system, and ensure that the people who come here can arrive in numbers that we can house, employ, and care for. That's how it always was, and that's how we're going to restore
Thank you, Mr. Poilievre. That is our time for this segment. Those are our 5 themes, but we are not done yet. We are entering the next section of our debate tonight, what we're calling the leader's choice, something a little bit different. Each of you will get the chance to ask a question, any question, of any other leader. You can then debate the answer, and each one on one will last for 3 minutes. So, Mr. Singh, you have the first option here. Who do you want to ask your question of?
Mr. Carney.
Go for it.
Mr. Carney, as chair of Brookfield Investments, your company is one of the biggest tax dodgers in Canada. As chair, you approved decisions where Brookfield Investments bought up affordable homes, kicked out the tenants, and jacked up the rates. As Prime Minister, one of the first things you did was a tax cut that helped out mostly millionaires. And you have a plan to cut services for people. I expect that of Mr. Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives. That's very much a conservative plan. But my concern is that doesn't sound like what people want for a liberal leader. So my question to you is, Mr. Carney, whose side are you really on?
Thank you very much for that question, Mr. Singh. I'm on the side of Canadians. I'm in this for Canadians. I work for Canadians.
But your track record
I
show
had
that, though.
I have a track record of public service for this country. Go back to something Mr. Blanchet referenced earlier, which is have I resolved any crises. We're in Quebec. If you ask anyone in the finance industry, if you ask anyone in government in Quebec in 2008, they'll know that I resolved the biggest crisis in Quebec. Yeah,
You want to have fun?
But
$60 million.
I'm in fairness with Mr. Singh. Yes, I have had a long career in the private sector. I'm proud of that career. I've always acted with integrity, and it brings me with experience that I can apply in this moment of crisis.
And you certainly serve the country. But the problem is who you serve. You've served to benefit those at the very top. You jacked up the price of homes for people living in affordable homes as a strategic decision. You dodge taxes, and then your decisions as Prime Minister show you're not prioritizing people, but you're prioritizing big business, billionaires.
So what have we done as a government directly? So we've gone directly to workers using all of our proceeds from the tariffs, committing all of them for workers most affected. Unlike others who plan to use them to cut taxes. We are focused on.
The EI is not high enough, though. You have to accept that. Right now,
there will be additional programs. I am fully confident that the next government, whatever government is formed, certainly if I'm in the next government, we will make additional programs.
But you did do that.
You couldn't given the word election process. May I make a core point here, if I may, which is that when you think about workers here today and people watching at home, particularly younger people, there is an enormous opportunity in the trades, in the skilled trades. We are going to build this country in a way that has not been seen before. We are literally talking about hundreds of thousands, not jobs, but careers in the trade. And that's why we're investing in apprenticeships and mid-career.
I think people are weird, Mr. Carney. If New Democrats aren't there to force liberals to make sure they remember about people, they will forget.
Gentlemen, that is time. Thank you for that. Mr. Blanchet, you have the next question. To whom would you like to put it?
Mr. Carney, you avoided quite, I would say, skillfully the questions of Mr. Singh. But first, let me correct something. In 2008, not so much by your decision, $10 billion were given to car industry in Ontario, while 60 millions, not billions of dollars, were lent to Lumberwood throughout the whole of Canada. I don't believe that's the right way to manage a crisis, since you did not recoup the money from the car industry. Then, you have been manager of Brookfield. It's supposed to be a green investment fund, but we now know that 50% of the investments of Brookfield is in fossil fuel. It's not so green. You seem to want to support oil and gas industry. That's interesting. You want to support prefab housing, and it's also in the investments of Brookfield, but not in Canada. You want to support nuclear power, smaller reactors, which are more dangerous, by the way.
Lie on your side and place
in Westinghouse. You have hidden the money of Brookfield in Bermuda and Cayman Island, $30 billion. Billions of dollars lost for Canada. You are having your taxes being paid by families, workers, elders in Canada and Quebec instead of paying your own taxes. So I want to know, will you, before the election, reveal all the details of your assets, as Mr. Singh has done, as Mr. Poilievre has done, and as I have done? We have a right to know under those circumstances.
Let's let him answer.
Well, the first thing is, I wanted to say a word about, I'll say a word about Brookfield. This is a Canadian success story. It is the largest infrastructure investor and developer in the world. It is one of the largest, if not the largest, developer of renewable power in the world. And who benefits from that? That's Canadian pensioners. That's Quebec pensioners. That is teachers. That is firefighters. It is a series of people, including individuals on the state, benefit from that. Now, always acted with integrity. Served the shareholders of Brookfield when I was there. I have left that. I have followed all the rules well in advance.
Let's reveal your assets like we all did.
And working for the people of Canada.
What do you own? Why don't you tell Canadians what you own?
Mr. Blanchet, we're moving on to Mr. Poilievre now, who has his opportunity to ask the question of whomever he'd like here, and that will be
Mr. Carney, but if I could begin by setting the stage. The choice in this election is, after a lost liberal decade of rising cost and crime and falling economy under America's thumb, do we want to elect them to a fourth term? Or do you want to change? Change so that you can afford food and homes. Change so that you can be safe on your street, and change so that your paycheck grows faster than your cost of living. Change with a new conservative government. Because Mr. Carney has not changed. Mr. Carney, in 2020, it was recorded, you began advising Justin Trudeau. It's still on the Liberal Party website today that you are Justin Trudeau's economic advisor. You might want to update your website on that. On June 3rd of 2021, you said that inflation would be a sign of economic progress. And you advised governments, including Justin Trudeau's, your Liberal government, to print money, which led to the worst inflation crisis in a generation. Now, that means that mothers went to bed with empty fridges and empty bank accounts, worried how they'd feed their kids, that seniors worried they'd be evicted from their homes, that young people believed they'd never be able to own a home in the first place. Now, in retrospect, you look back on the Liberal decisions that you advised Justin Trudeau to take. Will you look to the camera in the eye and apologize to the many people who suffered as a result of the inflationary policies that you advised Justin Trudeau to implement?
I said earlier, but I'm going to say it again. I know you want to be running against Justin Trudeau. Justin Trudeau isn't here.
Are you denying your economic advisor?
I did not provide any of that advice. I did not provide any of that advice.
Are you accusing your Liberal Party of lying about your role? Because it says today you can go to the Liberal Party website now and it says that you are Justin Trudeau's economic advisor.
The way you judge, in my view, is how they act. What they do when they have responsibility. Twice I was a central bank governor. And in both cases, if I may, in both cases when I was responsible for inflation, inflation was less than 2%. I'll add that when I was here responsible for the Bank of Canada, inflation was less than 2%. Our dollar was at parity. That is the kind of success that I can deliver for this country coming out of this crisis. And what is at stake here? What is at stake? What is at stake here?
If we bring it back, if I may bring it back, in a generation, because the policies that you implemented, those of the MPs that are still in your ministry, to the fellow Canadians, the last 10 years has been about the Liberals. The next 10 years should be about you.
And that's time. Mr. Carney, good news is the next question is yours.
Well, I'm going to ask myself a question. Actually, I'm going to ask a question which has been troubling me. And it's troubled me because we are in a very dangerous and divided world.
Who is it to?
I'm going to ask a question to Mr. Poilievre. Well, we're in a dangerous and divided world. We talked earlier about the challenges in the Middle East, the threats from Iran, threats from Russia, Russia's aggression in Ukraine. We have the threat from China, which I raised. We have the United States, which is fundamentally changing its security relationships, its commercial relationships. We have all this. And in the context of that, every one on the stage, Mr. Blanchet, Mr. Singh, myself, we have our top secret security clearance. We have our top secret security clearance. I got mine within 3 weeks. It wasn't hard, but I felt it was important that I had it so I could be in a position to be informed about that dangerous world and take decisions out. And Mr. Poilievre, it is now 950 days, if my numbers are right, since you've had the opportunity to get your top secret security clearance, and you've refused. Why?
Well, first of all, I have got my security clearance when I was minister. I got top secret clearance at the time, so there's no problem getting that. But when the government made this recent offer, they said that if I got the secret security clearance briefings, that I would be gay under the security law, and I could be prosecuted if I spoke freely. If I got the secret security clearance briefings, that I would be gay under the security law, and I could be prosecuted if I spoke freely about matters of foreign interference. Now, given that Canada has experienced Chinese interference by Beijing, the government of China, in 2 consecutive elections, I needed to do my job to speak freely without fear of prosecution. And that was not something I would be allowed to do. Even Thomas Mulcair, the former leader of the NDP, said that when he was the leader of the opposition, he never would have accepted the kind of gag order that your government and Mr. Trudeau's government was attempting to impose on me. And it's good that I made that decision because it has allowed me to speak freely about things like the case where one of your candidates, sir, actually said that he wanted to send a political opponent to China under a bounty threatening his life or imprisonment, and you refused to get rid of him. Now, it might have something to do with the fact that you went to China not long ago to get a $250 million loan for your company. But the reality is, you refused to stand up for a Canadian who was being threatened by a foreign government, and I was able to speak freely on that matter because I refused the gag order that the Liberal government attempted to impose on me.
Well, there's a couple interesting things. I think people at home have seen a robust debate here, and it's been a robust campaign, and it has not stopped Mr. Blanchet or Mr. Singh at times during his campaign by making challenges with respect to these issues. So one can address it. I will observe, as someone with a top secret security clearance, that China is not the only country that is accused of foreign interference. And
gentlemen, that is
we'll
time for
leave
the
it at
segment. That's our time. Now, closing statements are still a few minutes down the road, so we have a little bit of time for some quick hit Q&As for each of you right now. Short questions, 45 seconds, please, on the answers, and we're going to go left to right as I look at you right now. Ms. Poilievre, you get the first question. To the best of my knowledge, you have not offered a hard timeline, as the other parties have, to meet Canada's NATO commitment of 2% spending on defense. When would you hit that target?
My aim will be to 2030. That said, when we renegotiate our trade deal with the U.S., I know it's their priority to see us increase our military budget. One of the things I will say to the Americans is the more free trade, tariff-free free trade we have, the faster we can rebuild our military in Canada and reassert our sovereignty. And we will use that money to have heavy icebreakers in the north, Poseidon aircraft, fighter jets, a new base in the north, double the Arctic Rangers, fill the vacancies in the armed forces, and rebuild the warrior spirit that characterized our military since the birth of our country. We will rebuild our forces, and we will stand behind our veterans.
Thank you, Mr. Poilievre. Ms. Carney, your question. You have cut both the consumer carbon tax and the capital gains tax increase that you inherited from your predecessor. Is that an admission that the Liberals made life less affordable for Canadians?
I think let me give the rationale behind both of those changes. First, with respect to the consumer carbon tax. In effect, it become too divisive for Canadians. Canadians received rebates. On the whole, they received more than the tax actually was. But some had represented that it was a tax without a rebate. It became divisive. It didn't serve its purpose. It made a relatively modest contribution to overall climate goals. I got rid of it. First act, made Canadians whole. Secondly, but with respect to the capital gains tax, it's come up again. I'll be quick. This is a fundamental issue. We need to build this country. Builders, innovators, entrepreneurs need to be rewarded. That's why I brought it back.
And that's time. Thank you, Mr. Singh. Would you change the existing cap on immigration?
I said that the level of immigration, first of all, we need immigration. It's fundamentally important to our country. And we speak to any small business owner, you speak to people here in Quebec, you speak to farmers. It's fundamentally important. A couple things, though, we know we need to be able to set the amount of folks that we welcome to our country at a level that it meets our needs. So I would ensure that we've got an expert panel that makes that determination based on our economic needs. We also know that we should be very clear that the lack of investment from Liberals and Conservatives resulted in the fact that we have a shortage in housing. That's something we've got to fix. I should also point out that if you were worried about the cuts being proposed by Liberals and Conservatives, vote for New Democrats. We'll fight back to protect Canadians and make sure we've got the right immigration levels.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. That's time. Mr. Blanchet, Quebec, I believe, is now the only province with a carbon tax. Do you think that's fair?
It's not entirely true. It's not a tax. What Quebec has is a system by which we invite big emission companies, I don't know how to translate that, to reduce their emissions. If they do not, then they have to pay. It goes into a fund, which is invested then in reducing emissions. Our partner is California, which makes this a huge deal about reducing emissions. This is what we do. This is to be compared to what Europe does. And by the way, Europe would impose tariffs on Canadian oil if it ever got there. We're quite proud of that, and we have to be responsible because this is much less expensive than doing nothing.
That's time. We're going to do another set of quick hits here, left to right again, and 30 seconds this time. Mr. Poilievre, you previously promised to defund the CBC as one of your very first acts as Prime Minister. Is that still the plan?
Yes, CBC will continue to operate as a self-funded, Canadian-owned and controlled non-for-profit that raises money like other media organizations through sponsorships, subscriptions, advertising, licensing fees, and countless other things that will ensure Canadians who still want to listen and view its content will be able to do so. And at the same time, will allow freedom of the press so that everybody has their voice heard and they can make their own decisions.
Thank you, Mr. Carney. Next question to you, 30 seconds. Would you remove some of Canada's legal tax avoidance loopholes that companies that you have worked for have used?
Look, I think that what we need to do is undertake a comprehensive review of our corporate tax system and do that on the basis of the right principles. We've got to have fairness, transparency, sustainability, and competitiveness. So we need a tax system, a corporate tax system, including being part of an international minimum corporate support.
Not being able to meet as many people as I would love to have. It's a short campaign, and so I can't get to as many.
And that was always touching to me, that they would put their faith in me or in it.
With counter tariffs. We'll...
Yeah. That just seems like the worst way to do this. In my opinion. I don't know. I'm gonna think about that. A lot of he said, she said. A lot of he said, she said. That feels like time I will not get back. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna end the stream there. I'm gonna be back in a bit, take a little break, but then I'm gonna get to the real work. I'm gonna ask for a handout, just gonna take